If growth is your goal, and I would guess that it is, let me tell you what I.
Okay, just one moment here. I'm getting everything fired up. I blasted out the live stream notifications, and it appears to me that the OBS just launched pretty much spontaneously, which is fine. And I'm waiting for the audio streams to pick up as well. I'll just go ahead and turn on phones immediately, and we'll just consider this the starting point. This is the last of the dog days of summer 2023, 8/11. And let's go ahead and just start with the chat. I want to see who's here already. The early penguins. Okay, Lando Rock, Jay Diggs, Rocco Calzone. Yeah, you asked if there's no sound. I think it was because it started unintentionally. Lando says, smartest people on the World Wide Web. Right, well, we are definitely in possession of some heavily gate kept knowledge, and we've been kind of running amok with it. And I've been thinking about this lately. Like, I'm now of the opinion that fake bird conspiracy, or that fake conspiracy, what do you call it? The birds are fake is a fake conspiracy. And I think it was created in order to discredit those of us who are making legitimate points about media fakery. And the numbers are growing. The issue now, though, that we're confronting is simply that it appears to be an ongoing effort to drown out any kind of truth or any kind of relevance. Okay, audio is very low. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so we'll go ahead and wait a minute before we officially start. I'm going to go ahead and check all the settings. I was listening to the audio from earlier today, and it seemed like it was pretty good on the caller side. Okay, here we go. Go ahead and cover your ears. We're jumping up 300%. We'll go 270. I think that's what I was yesterday. 270. Sorry for all the technical issues. Like I said, we've been kind of jumping into this crawl, walk, run thing, and I'm doing the test on the fly. Generally, I do these things in advance. Okay, again, give me a few minutes to get the audio right. And I still have to update a few things, but I'm getting some reverb, so I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, I think we're back on. Let me know how the audio is. We'll go ahead and give others time to attend. It's only 7 o'clock. We're just on time, but I'm gonna wait a few minutes to make sure the audio is fine. And of course, I might even have some voicemails to attend to. Let me go ahead and check my voicemails. Okay, it just seems like it's a default thing that I'm gonna have to crank it up every time. For some reason, it goes back down to the 0, and I'm still waiting for the audio to pick up on the. Here we go. So if you're listening on TuneIn or Paranormal Radio, it's about to pick up. It'd be very helpful if I had an Android, some kind of personal assistant here. There's like 50 little side tasks that I could easily outsource, which I probably will. You know, all these people who are whining about being replaced by AI, it's like, well, be unreplaceable. You know, I no longer use Fiverr because of Chat GPT. You know, Chat GPT is a labor saving device. It's not artificial intelligence. There's so much hype about what these things are and aren't. Okay, we're still not quite starting yet. We're waiting until the audio picks up on the other feed, so it'll just be a moment. In the meantime, let me go ahead and just switch on over and check the background music with some Chief Crow. And we will be right back. Again, I'm checking the background music and every background audio because after tonight, we're leaving this thing on.
I'm on auto hopes and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996.
96, y'all.
Gonna filter your eyes and serve your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'm gonna be an auto hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes. Got no heart, ain't got no soul. Food, water, weather, maps, TV, bones, books, secrets, symbols, numbers, planets, etc. Nobody got no heart.
Okay, I don't mean to get conspiratorial here, but the reason why we weren't broadcasting on TuneIn, Paranormal Radio, RadioNet, Radio King, and a few others is the Wi-Fi was actually off on the laptop, which carries the audio encoder. And I don't know how that could have happened unless the CIA came in here into the office while I wasn't here and flipped the switch. Like this is something that takes a deliberate effort. You have to want to turn off your Wi-Fi. Don't know how it happened, but it happened. And someone had emailed me. They said, "Why is your tune-in off?" Anyway, I'm gonna have to install cameras in here. Today is August 11th, 2023, the last of the dog days of summer. Sirius, the dog star that they all worship and pay homage to in various publicly viewable ways, but always occulted. The days of celebrating Sirius's position behind the sun are over. In fact, on the 8th of August is the Lionsgate portal, And this is all just astrology stuff, but it means that the stars in Orion's belt are lined up with Sirius. And that may have some relation to the timing of the fire in Maui, if you want to look at this from a there are no coincidences perspective. And I'll go ahead and go through some of this. Thank you, Nicotramus. We at the IPS appreciate your support. And, the HQ, the headquarters, we are open. I was just looking at George News. I was subscribing to their email address because they've been promising for months that they were going to have a new website. And they changed their name to George Headquarters. And I'm like, that's so weird. They don't have headquarters. I mean, we do. Just saying, it's a little unusual to say you're in headquarters when you're technically not. But anyway, that's sort of besides the point, but I'm just bringing up that we're at the run phase. We crawl, walk, and now we're pretty much fully operational, with the exception of this laptop that I think was tampered with. We'll get to this later. So if you're trying to catch the audio streams, I'm just going to have to say it's an equipment failure on the laptop side. I will have to get to it later. I don't like to do tech support while I'm trying to take phone calls. By the way, phones are open. 1-505-349-0420. A couple of the topics. The fake fight in Alabama. We're debating, was it fake, was it real? There was a number of people suggesting maybe it was staged and then real people jumped in. And so we have all these kind of takes on it. Nobody knows for sure. Well, I got some more information leaning towards, at least steering me towards fake. So we'll talk about the fake Alabama fight. Musk and Zuckerberg are going to fight in the Roman Colosseum. So we might as well talk about this now. Are they going to fight for real? Zuck and Musk, are they going to fake it? How are they going to fake it? Is it going to be CGI? I'm kind of curious as to how they're going to pull this off. And I know a couple of times there were indications that Musk was going to back out, claiming surgery. His mom said he couldn't come out and play. He said maybe we should just talk and debate, bro. But now it's actually going to the point where they're making plans. Musk has said it's going to look like ancient Rome. You won't see anything modern in any of it. I was disappointed that he was trying to cop out. I'm like, this guy's going to die on Mars. He's leading the way, but he's afraid to fight a 5'7", 150-pound Zuck. I mean, it's better than what he originally proposed, which was a measuring contest, which he would have won. Cyborgs beat androids. All right, so we are joined here by Rocco Calzone, J Diggs 6079 Smith. Gregzer70 says the sound is better on Twitch. Mom with Sons, Yurt Mama. Osher06, Jennifer Reeves, happy belated birthday again. Infinite Plane Trotter says it'll be in virtual. See, that's what I'm wondering. Are they going to fake it? Should we just start calling it out? It's going to be fake. It's going to be crappy graphics. Joined by Geometria101 and thank you 737. Appreciate the support. And so many things going on. I want to talk about the Barbie movie a little bit, which I haven't seen, and I haven't seen Oppenheimer. But I just read Miles Mathis's piece on Oppenheimer. And there are too many connections between the two movies that we were intentionally made to focus on, the whole Barbenheimer thing, but also the fact that they faked nukes with dollhouses and fireworks, basically. And they used that fakery to reset the world, reset geopolitics, terrorize humanity. You realize that ever since they faked nukes, we have been in a hostage situation. It's been this way, and we were born into this hostage situation. But if you really think about it, what they did is they convinced us that they had this power. They faked it so well that they actually got it. They faked it till they made it, and it put us into a subjective dream world. That's how they put us into the Matrix. And this was really given away in Newsbenders. Newsbenders, 1960s, 30-minute theater, about how they write the news 5 years in advance. Well, I think that was an understatement. It's got to be 50. It's got to be 100. The Shill channel says, have you seen what has been done to the gematria calculator? Hundreds of results are now given for each search term. Most of them are misspelled words and meaningless phrases. Yeah, look, I totally get ciphers and gematria and code, it's there. But anytime you got to do any kind of computations, you're taking it one step away from a direct observation. And I think it can be misleading. Not only can it be misleading, but I think it's not evidence in support of there being a significant meaningful connection. Like, okay, there are connections and there are meaningful connections. There are coincidences and there are meaningful coincidences. So I don't say there are no coincidences. Obviously there are. But there's a distinction to be made between the meaningful ones, the intentional ones. But the gematria thing, the idea that words have numerical associations and that you take similarly valued words and they somehow correlate, yeah, that's kind of a form of mysticism. But what's more important here is that the way they code their rituals is with this deliberate kind of inculcation of numerical value into names, the use of specific dates. So it's there. There is something there. But what I try not to do is get too myopic about it or to be led by a cognitive bias, because you can prove anything. And we saw this with 8-4. Trump was not shot on 8-4. Yet, none of the the gematria math that calculated that date will make sense in 1 year. So some number of these individuals were very convinced, and they have huge channels. And I thought, you know what? They're putting the credibility on the line. A lot of people are on the hook here, and there's something very addictive about this prophecy cultism, where you create a cult around a date, and everybody's watching, and it builds up tension, and then the day comes and it goes, and it's like you think people would scatter. Anyway, it's been fascinating. But here's where it gets a little fuzzy to me, is where they say, okay, the dates between, and I just saw this one today, the dates between the births of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are 666 weeks. And I think it was 672 weeks, but then they subtracted a day. I mean, it's close enough, I guess, which I guess with gematria it's okay. Anyway, moving on. Moving on here. Because I take all kinds of perspectives into account. I just don't take their conclusions. Like, you can agree with the facts because the facts are the facts. It's when you get into conclusions that often involve somebody's, pet theories. And everybody has their explanation as to who controls the world. Like, if you think it's the Jesuits or you think it's the EGIs or the aliens, it's going to really color your interpretation. Joined by AJ206, thank you for joining. Okay, now one more thing. I was listening to a description of January 6th from the perspective of the chief of police at the time. He was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson. And he said that there were 19 known domestic terrorists en route to D.C. 19 known domestic terrorists on their way to 9/11 America. Because that's how they're treating 1/6. They made it into the next 9/11. But think about that. How many hijackers? 19. Led by 33-year-old Mohammed Atta. Then you have the QAnon shaman at the time, 33, who's a major league grifter now, by the way. The QAnon grifter. And he was there, and they knew there were 19 domestic terrorists. Not saying he was one of them, but the number 19 is key here. So I just thought I'd put that out there. I think I have it in my notes. And I listened to the QAnon shaman's interview with Alex Jones, and I just realized I just heard David Icke all over again. It's just David Icke's entire pitch, minus the reptilians, but everything else is there. I mean, if you didn't know, Icke's kind of a shaman. He took ayahuasca before Tales from the Time Loop. He was talking about saving the children back in like 2002 or something, with Children of the Matrix, I think. He was talking about adrenochrome, and the queen's actually a 12-foot tall, shape-shifting, blood-drinking reptilian. He was way ahead of the curve, but then everybody just forgot about that stuff. It's interesting how things get repackaged. Now nobody's about the reptilians. Now it's trans. It went from uh, reptilians to trans all of a sudden, but it's the same people. Could it be both? Like trans reptilians secretly run the world? All right, continuing, let's go through the Minds notes. Oh, Infinite Plane Trotter says Ike wouldn't go stationary Earth. Yeah, he couldn't make the leap off the edge of the world stage paradigm. He's kind of stuck on the ball. And look, if you're stuck on the ball, you're what I consider to be a ball worshiper. Not that you worship it, but I mean Baal, the god of the world, because the ball Earth is technically, I think, an idol. It's the God construct. And I want to talk more about idols tonight, which is why I brought up Barbie. So we'll go ahead and bring this up next because how many of you listened or read The Secret Sun? It's a blog spot that I've been keeping up with. It had drawn attention to something that I'm going to pull up here. It has to do with the timing of the Barbie movie, and he's correlated her with the Babylon working. Jack Parsons and all that stuff. So secretsun.blogspot.com. Barbie and the Babylon Bomb. Now, this is interesting because the actress that plays her, her name is it Margot? Margot? Well, this same actress played in that movie Babylon. And here you have her in red, scarlet, and we were already talking about the movie Asteroid City, about this actress in the desert played by Scarlett Johansson. Again, the Babylon goddess archetype is called the Scarlet Woman. And Marjorie Cameron, the original Scarlet Woman who was there with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, was the first to sight a UFO. Asteroid City, Scarlett Johansson sees the UFO descending. So there's something adding up here. There's a bigger picture, and I have a link here to my Substack article I put out about 3 or 4 months ago about all the various witches in red, the Scarlet Women that we see in all the various movies, from Game of Thrones to Doctor Strange. We have Vanilla Sky, the 100. It's a reoccurring character, most recently played by Rihanna at the Super Bowl, which is entirely connected to this New Age goddess. And what they did is they just rebranded Isis as Babylon. That's the long and short of it. And so the connection here is that Margot Robbie and this Babylon archetype correlates or connects to the actual Barbie doll, which if you get into the the basis of idols and idol magic and idol worship and dolls, there's really fundamentally no difference between a toy and an idol. And this also ties in to what we saw in the summer of 2020 when Chadwick Boseman died. And you had all these children having ritual funerals for the toy Black Panther. And it was like Rip King. And we'll talk about this some more. I have a lot of this stuff in my notes here. Again, phones are open. If you want to call in, numbers on the screen. Now, someone did ask David Icke about the shape of the world, and he said it didn't matter. That ultimately it's an extension of us, it's a co-creation, it could be a cube. He was in the camp of it didn't matter. And on one level, I can understand what he's suggesting, because he thinks that we're more in a matrix or simulation, and that it's something of a test for us collectively and individually. His book, Tales from the Time Loop, has some very fascinating ideas in that regard. But he didn't get too hyper-focused on shape. To me, the value in that is in the ability to discredit the ones who tell you what it is. And that's really a huge advantage. But I think when you're playing ball, as Ike obviously is, you don't want to really do any real damage. Okay, I'm continuing here. Thinks He's a Penguin 101 said, this would be funnier if it didn't affect everyone in their everyday lives. It's still funny, but would be more enjoyable. Okay, well, the thing is, there are no buttons they can push that will wipe everybody out. Nukes are fake. Asteroids are fake. Space wars, fake. Space junk, fake. trans reptilians running the world, fake. All these things that they give people to be afraid of, mainstream and alternative, are fake. Sorry to say this, and this might hurt some feelings, but chemtrails are fake until proven otherwise. And I'm just saying this stuff because this is ultimately good news. These white pills are good news. These things are fake. These things are not to be feared. Politics is all theater. There are no true enemies at the level of nations because they all share a space station, which is also fake. So we're looking at the fake world order, the lie world order. So in many ways, this is good news. The bad news is, I don't know, we live in a realm of deception, pure deception, from the top down. I mean, it seems sort of off. I mean, it's perplexing. I think that's why we're focused on it. Like, what does it mean that we're witnessing weaponized lying and superstition and emotional manipulation at collective and individual levels, putting people at war with one another? Like, what is this all about? I find it to be very fascinating. That's why I've adopted this radical skepticism, which is what we're really primarily advancing here, is a reintroduction of this level of skepticism. And it's a philosophical position, but we're not just talking about being skeptical about the nature of reality or anything like that. I'm talking about directing it and directing it to all claims originating from the worldview shaping mechanism of mass media. Okay, continuing here. 737 says, leave Daddy Ike alone. Look, I like David Icke. I brought him up because QAnon Shaman has basically replaced him. Like, you know how you had Roosh in 2016? You had these alt-right manosphere types. They've been replaced by like Andrew Tate, for example. And I think Ike is being phased out or something, and QAnon Shaman's just stepping up. It's just literally the same story. If 5% of us wake up, we will have a mass awakening. And that's another scam. The idea that they're waking up, because it's a false awakening. You think QAnon Shaman is leading people to an awakening? He's talking about med beds, 5G, some kind of, or fifth dimensional aliens from the Pleiadian, some was it the Galactic Federation and Pleiadians, and this suppressed technology, med beds, life extension, great awakening. It's very new agey, and it sounds. And also he talks about. I mean, look, some of the stuff makes some sense, but I'm just saying it's standard new age sewage. Like, it's not original, and it doesn't answer any questions, and it gives a false big picture. The big picture, like, oh yeah, we're all trapped in a matrix, and it's a spiritual trap, and if we can just overcome, it's a nice story, but I think it's a big picture that ignores the nuance of the fact that it's a man-made picture. It's not aliens, it's not reptilians, it's advanced media, it's religion, high-tech religion. And the more I look at this thing, the more it looks to me like aliens, for example. Aliens are just angels repackaged for atheists. Global warming, we know this. This is just the judgy God who's going to punish the enemies. And notice, with the Christians, if you believe that God's going to flood the wicked and you have to build yourself an ark, you are referring to the political left. Like, those are the wicked. And if you are a believer in this new religion of scientism, then you believe in the flood God. But he's going to flood your enemies who are on the right, the ones who don't believe in science and recycling, the ones who still do capitalism. So these are belief systems that they use in this bifurcated system to set side A against side B in every single way. But it's a mirror. That's my main point. It's a mirror. I'm not saying that these things are equal. I'm not making false moral equivalencies here. I don't think woke and red pill are equal, but they're parallel traps. They each represent fringes of this box. Okay, here, Geometry 101 says correctly, these countries disagree on everything except Antarctica and space. Yeah, look at the International Space Station and the international agreements about Antarctica. It seems like at the extremes of what's way up there and what's way out that way, they seem to agree. And look, I take the mainstream news uh, less and less seriously as time goes on because we all witnessed 9/11 or experienced the after effects, and it was radical Islamic terrorists, radical clerics. You had these secret jihadi cells in certain mosques that you had to contact, trace these Quranic verses. Where did they get them? Who went to Yemen? You had this story of the stealth jihad. They're taking over school boards. They're infiltrating. Obama's one of them. And that disappeared overnight. And it's been replaced by the same people who were preaching this Islamophobic stealth jihad thing. Well, now they're afraid of Chinese people buying up property and taking over police stations. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, that's interesting how it's like they just got a memo one day. And they said, okay, it's been 19 years. The whole Islamo-terrorist thing is over. Now we're going to rebrand everything. We have the domestic violent extremists for the next 19 years, the QAnons to replace the Quran radicals, and then we're going to replace the infiltration narrative with the Chinese now. I mean, they've really just replaced these things. So everything is super interchangeable is my point. Samyash says the Abrahamic religions really erased the history of religion of the world. Okay, I agree with that. Although my contention here is that heliocentrism is just the latest of the Abrahamic religions. That scientism, transhumanism, the whole space travel thing, this is the newest iteration of the Abrahamic faiths. That's why it's replete with the 42666 cubes, hexagrams, and all of its symbolism. It's the same system. Saturn V rocket. In fact, they really give this stuff away in so many of their ceremonies. Like on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, they projected the Saturn V onto the Washington Monument. Layers of meaning here, showing how one age has just merged with the next one seamlessly. They just projected a new cover onto it. Same exact meaning. And I determined just based on symbolism that the obelisk, the Burning Man, Christ, that it all represented this type of the way they use Christ. This notion of ascension from the material realm to the celestial. And they've correlated this number 33 with ascension. And we've been talking about this for some time. Well, just found out the other day that escape velocity to escape Earth, according to NASA, is Mach 33. 33 times the speed of sound. Then you have the runway 33 out there at the Kennedy Spaceport in Florida. So we've been correct. I think we've been vindicated. But my point being, the symbolism is the same. It's like whether you're talking about the tree of life and going from the kingdom to the crown, some kind of ascension in consciousness, and you're passing by these spheres named for the planets, or you're talking about space travel. It's all allegory. I think space travel is Masonic allegory. And they used to use stonemasons, and that's why they say Freemasons is all about stonework as allegory for higher states of consciousness or moral improvement, etc. And now I think space travel and transhumanism is like the new allegorical model for the same thing, but the masses are only given the exoteric interpretation. John Cordone says, good call from Rocco last night. Yeah, Rocco at Ground Zero in Maui. And we had another caller as well, a repeat caller who'd called from Colorado, he had said. Dimitri 101 says, Pentagon is surrounded by two highways, 110 and 27. Adds to 137, the 33rd prime. Interesting. I mean, the Pentagon, what interests me is the construction date was 9/11, 1960, was it 1940? Like 60, I think, was it 1941? It's like 60 years to the day. They had to have the 9/11. Yeah, the moon tracker guy who called in was great. We were talking about the moon and he's been tracking the moon, and he predicted an eclipse without basically off his own observations. But he's going to be calling in continually as we lead our up to this this great, what is it called? The great, um, there's some kind of big eclipse. What are they calling it though? And it's going to be on 4/8. So this next April. On 4/8, we got this culmination of a lot of people watching this thing, this Xing across America. And X is really significant right now. We've been talking about this, you know, Twitter becoming X. Then you put the big glowing cross up on the building. And I'm just like, okay, this is interesting because now we have disease X. In fact, I heard something interesting from, I think I'll bring up the clip where someone had suggested that we're being prepped for the mark of the beast and the X is just a mark. Okay, phones are open. I don't have any voicemails at the moment here, but you're welcome to leave voicemails 24/7. Not Shocked says Mach 33, spelled M-O-C-K. Okay, now if you watch the Top Gun movie, which was chronologically 33 years after the first, and the production of the movie itself started 33 years after. But the movie is replete with characters with names like, Phoenix, Hangman, who's an actor, 33, Hangman, if you get it, a Jesus reference. And he was calling himself the Savior and good throughout the movie. You had Rooster, which is another symbol of Christ. I mean, basically every character in that movie had this built-in Christ thing. Tom Cruise, if you didn't know, divorced each of his wives when they reached 33. He's got all kinds of strange 33s connected to him as well. But at the beginning of the movie, he goes Mach 10 in this new experimental craft. And the instant he hits that Mach 10, he says something like, no, it's when he hits Mach 7.3. And 7.3 is a very interesting number in this regard as well, but he goes off the radar. And they all laugh and they say he went over the ballage. They called it ballage of the earth. I'm like, that's a weird word. But they all laughed when they said, oh, he went over the curve. That's why we can't see him. They laughed like it was a joke. But if you haven't seen the Top Gun movie, it is nothing but sun worship, and it's just replete with symbolism where instead of using the obelisk, they're using the planes. It's pretty obvious when you get into it. But I did a whole piece on it because I watched it, and every character's name has an occult meaning, and every scene is referencing phoenixes and Christ, and even the name Thomas, Tom Cruise. Well, Thomas means twin, and twin cross, and the second coming, Top Gun 2, is also another reoccurring theme. Thinks he's a penguin says, I'm looking forward to the eclipse myself. Yeah, and people may wonder why we are looking at these dates with any kind of expectation. And I think J.P. Morgan said it, that millionaires don't care about astrology, but billionaires do. And that's absolutely true. And it makes all the more sense when you take into account the fact that mainstream media has supplanted the old school religion. The old religion's been supplanted and replaced by media. And all the religions are based on the sun and the calendar year. And so these various psyops happening on certain dates are because these are actually just going over these old traditional dates. I mean, we do really live in this. Let me go back to this article from The Secret Sun because he puts it pretty bluntly at the beginning. He says, the problem with this kind of work is that you start to see everything as a ritual, and most probably a satanic sex magic ritual. That's not your imagination. You're seeing the world the way it really is. Again, this is back to that article, Secret Sun. Barbie, Barbello, Babylon, and the Bomb. The Babylon Working. He says, I bring this up because Barbenheimer, this necromantic working meme that everyone was talking about a few weeks ago, was getting on my nerves. And I was thinking about James Shelby Downward and his King Kill 33 essay. And this is a great piece here. This is from James Shelby Downward, where he talks about the world that we live in right now. And this was written decades ago. And he said, never allow anyone the luxury of assuming that because the dead and deadening scenery of the American city of dreadful night is so devoid of mystery and flat-footed and sterile, so burdened with the illusion of baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet that it is outside the psychosexual domain. The eternal pagan psychodrama has escalated under these modern conditions because sorcery is not what 20th century man can accept as real. And that's his introduction to the ritual deconstruction of the execution of, or the assassination of Kennedy. And one thing about the Kennedy thing, because I had looked at this a little closer recently, because there are connections here that have been made between the Kennedy assassination and the Trinity site and the meaning behind it. But Kennedy was shot in the head, the throat, and the chest. And these are the three wounds of Hiram Abiff in the Masonic drama. So like everything really does comport. But we'll go through this a little further here. But if you haven't seen it, I'm going to put a link to the article because this is, again, the Secret Sun blogspot, and this article here is just making some fascinating connections, and these are things that we've been looking at. But basically, here we go. Trinity was the code name of the first detonation of a nuclear weapon conducted at 5:29 a.m. July 16th as part of the Manhattan Project. This was at the White Sands, and then he's connecting it to the Babylon working, a series of ceremonies and rituals performed January to March 1946 by Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, and Marjorie Cameron based on Aleister Crowley, and similar descriptions were in 1917's Moonchild. Now, really quick here, on coincidence, I guess, today I found this, someone posted something here. It turns out that Ghislaine Maxwell has a brother-in-law who was rubbing shoulders with Jack Parsons. Like some fascinating connection there. I'll pull that clip up here. Frank Molina, Ghislaine Maxwell's sister, Christine's father-in-law, and Jack Parsons, 1936. So I looked into this a little bit today and I found a few clips, just kind of some notes about their connections. Daily Beast did a piece on it, so we'll probably return to that, but I'm just bringing it up that you have this connection between the Babylon working, the creation of our fake space age religion, this momentous ritual. Here it says the Maxwell twins' husbands have bizarre histories. Here we go. Christine is married to Roger Molina, astrophysicist at the University of Texas. His father hung out with L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, occultists and transhumanists, a strange echo of Jeffrey Epstein's friends in similar academic and business circles. Very interesting all around. I mean, you get these are, I mean, it's a really small circle, but this stuff is worthy of mind mapping. We're just talking about the character that played Barbie, the actress, and this Babylon thing, and that's what we're connecting it to. Because what I take out of all of this stuff here is that in our modern scientism, transhumanist paradigm, this new religion, that's what it is. Our worldview isn't based on science. It's a religious paradigm dressed up like science. But it's a combination of space as heaven and transcendence. It's with that, though, you also have the Scientology, which is a huge part of it, is the space religion. But built into Scientology is actually the pandemic model. And the pandemic model and the quarantining, the vaccinating, the curing, the division between those who reject it, etc., that's an updated version of the religious paradigms, dividing society among the saved and the unsaved with sin. Again, virus is just an updated sin construct in this new system. So between Parsons, who brings in the religious thing, the occult side of this, Mystery Babylon, the true religion of this world, and the dressing of Scientology, and then you throw in Marjorie Cameron, the movie star, idol worship, representative of their goddess, Babylon, who's basically Mrs. Satan. You know, Babylon and the beast, they called Crowley the beast. They referred to the high priestess as Babylon. You kind of see the entire package here. The new religion, the genesis of it all. and how it's all basically built on the movies. That's the main point of, I think, Marjorie Cameron, and the name Cameron just sounds to me like camera on, that ultimately that this new world religion would be given to us not through a Bible, but through the camera lens, a very specifically directed one. And what's more, with this camera lens thing, you bring in Scientology, and I just mentioned Tom Cruise. Well, Scientology has always been about celebrity worship, the celebrity center, and movies. Like the public thinks, oh, it's just a cheap recruiting tactic. No, it's actually, I think it's part of their religion. Catching up on your comments. Jay Digg says Chris Knowles went into that topic on one of his higher side chats. Well, yeah, it's a big topic. I mean, we're going to continue to get into this Scarlet Woman. So if you don't know or you haven't heard this, the New Age religion has replaced or updated. So ISIS is now Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, or the Mother of Abominations, and this is the goddess of the occult system of Thelema, which is really the main religion that we're in right now. The whole idea of the Great Reset is the Thelemic Great Work. And I think we're actually witnessing the implementation of this, and this is the core. But Crowley believed that the Babylon goddess had an earthly aspect or an avatar, a living woman who occupied the spiritual office of the quote Scarlet Woman. This is not unlike the concept of the Pope being the vicar of Christ. And the role of the Scarlet Woman was to manifest the energies of the New Age. And so here you have Marjorie Cameron, who was there with Parsons and Hubbard. And then I was bringing up in this article all these various ways that they represented the same archetype in popular movies. And she's constantly there. This is the Red Witch from Game of Thrones. This is again the Scarlet Witch from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And if you look at Doctor Strange, he looks just like Jack Parsons. That's not a coincidence. Vanilla Sky, Women in Red, and they always have the same kind of connections and meanings. And then just kind of on the side note, Richard Branson calls his big boat the Scarlet Lady. And then his company is called Virgin, like Virgin Galactic, and it's got all this goddess worship stuff attached to it. And so his whole thing is like, it's interesting because you got Bezos and Musk and NASA. It's all male. It's all these gods, earth gods, sun gods. But Branson, who's always been depicted as a womanizer, has definitely the goddess angle. And even he has a big goddess on his plane. And if you look at their rituals, like, the rocket launches and stuff, the way that the Branson jet plane goes, it's lewd. If you look at it with the right frame of mind, when the two wings lift up and then you have the jet on the bottom. I mean, you have to watch it to know what I'm talking about, I think. But it's not hard to imagine because what we're talking about here are just ritualized fertility rites dressed up with a little bit of science fiction. So the veneration of the Virgin or the Scarlet Lady, this is all consistent with the space program's ulterior purpose as the de facto state religion's heaven program. The new goddess is the same as the old goddess, the night sky, Isis, Babylon to the New Age. Space is the womb from which the new sun emerges each morning. The entire space program is an allegorical cover for Mystery Babylon. So I brought this article up. This was originally published back in September. But again, more recently, we're just taking a look at Babylon, Margot Robbie, and this Barbie doll thing, this Barbie movie, and how it connects. So we'll get back to that in just a second. This is something that I found this morning on Twitter. It's a Twitter video. It's a video from 9/11. And if you look at the timestamp, it says 11/9/2001, 8:46 and 14 seconds. And I'm thinking this is an inside joke. So if you haven't seen this, you're looking at footage on 9/11, and the cameraman is, as I guess people just did back then, he's just driving around recording morning traffic. And he happens to be recording a billboard for Arnold Schwarzenegger's Collateral Damage. Let me go ahead and play this clip, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. 8:46 a.m. is when 9/11 happens. He zooms out. Now, if you look on the right, you can see the Twin Towers, and he zooms in just on time. Boom. Plane hits it. He just witnessed 9/11 starting. But now he's just going to put his camera back on the car in front of him. Honk honk. Back to his morning routine. Interesting clip. Very interesting. Now, Collateral Damage, though. The thing is, Collateral Damage, the movie, happens to be about terrorism. And in fact, in the movie, Collateral Damage, they had to make changes to the plot because of 9/11. It wasn't out yet, and they had to make some changes because it had some what you would consider to be predictive programming or even concurrent programming. So they quite literally altered it before they released it. Another thing we kind of glossed over was the shooting in Utah. Now, we always talk about how the political left loves to make their martyrs, their saints, they've always, like anybody who dies for any of their causes, they just love to turn them into martyrs. They really love these opportunities. It gives them leverage. And it's mocked. It's like, how can you turn this person into a saint or this person into some sort of a martyr? Why do you elevate them? And now the right wing is just as guilty of this. So I'm looking at Jack Posobiec is treating this guy in Utah like a martyr, which maybe he is, but I'm just saying I think it's just too predictable. He says, to me, it looks like what happened in Utah was the regime conducting a show of force. Now, again, the reason why I find this to be kind of off is that the guy in question was tweeting things like, I'm going to shoot the president. Like he was kind of baiting them. So the idea that he's a victim or that this was a show of force, it's just kind of this like partisan, blinkered outlook where they only see what they want to see. It's kind of comical. But you're going to see the story developing because I thought it was just going to pass that, okay, this crazy guy got shot, but no. They're getting behind him. They're turning him into something else. Now he was a good guy. He built a ramp for his disabled neighbor. Here's the tweet from Elon Musk about the upcoming CGI fight. The fight will be managed by my and Zuck's foundations, not the UFC. Live stream will be on X and Meta. Everything in the camera frame will be ancient Rome. Nothing modern at all. I spoke to the PM of Italy and the Minister of Culture. They have agreed on an epic location. Again, bread and circuses, this is totally perfect. We could have predicted it. We're like Zuckerberg idolizes Augustus Caesar, gives himself the Caesar haircut. Facebook is obviously the circus part of the bread and circus equation. Thumbs up, thumbs down, like, dislike. That's kind of the way that Caesar gauges the mood of the fickle masses. It's too perfect. Infinite Plane Trotter says X in Thelema exoteric symbol is Osiris risen. Yes. And you'll notice the Masons pray like that. The Mormons pray like that. The fans of Wakanda pray like that. The X over the chest is a symbol of Osiris risen. 737 says, never seen that video before today. Yeah, definitely subscribe Infinite Plane Society on Twitter and on YouTube. I uploaded it, and you can follow me also on Minds, and I also posted a link to it at ips.monster. I think it was that important that everyone see it because we're talking about a rare ips.monster. Yeah, there we go. We're talking about a very rare 9/11 clip that most people haven't seen. It was completely new to me. And let me give you some context to what was shown here. It's not just that he caught 9/11 happening and seems sort of like unimpressed, but I'm thinking this is like an inside joke. 9/11 was an inside joke. Did you know the movie Collateral Damage was supposed to include the famous Colombian actress Sofia Vergara, who played an airplane hijacker? But after the terror attack of 9/11, that scene was scratched from the movie. So they got too close. And this is very similar to how they put warnings on Netflix movies now. Like, oh, warning, this movie contains a scene just like the school shooting that you guys should have seen on the news today. Here's another one from the Wikipedia article, Collateral Damage. The September 11th attacks affected the release and editing of the final film. The original trailer was scrapped because it showed a major bomb attack in the United States. Let me just point out really quick, Donnie Darko also had its marketing materials scrapped because it had to do with falling plane parts. And Donnie Darko was directed by the son of a NASA employee, someone who worked at NASA, also interesting. The film was scheduled to be released on October the 5th, 2001, but it was postponed because of its terrorism theme and the attacks. So they didn't allow this movie to be aired. You know why? Because the mass media wanted to make sure that they were the only ones that could traumatize you with exploding buildings. Because they replayed 9/11 again and again and again for months. And they would always say, after the tragic events of 9/11, and it took a few years for them to stop saying the tragic events of. It was all just neuro-linguistic programming. And again, they are the MK Ultra mind control masters, and they didn't want to lose that stranglehold they had on that. Now it says, following this, Warner Bros. Removed any mentions of collateral damage from their website, their radio stations, television, and movie theaters. All trailers and posters for the film were also recalled. This is an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Eventually it was released. Not until February of 2002. Wow, that's a interesting little bit of predictive programming. I mean, again, if you missed the clip here, all you're seeing is the cameraman filming the billboard for the upcoming movie, which again was postponed because of what's about to happen. Then he zooms in on the towers. The attack happens at 8:46 a.m. on time. Mercury's rising. First hit happens at 33 seconds after 8:46 on this guy's clock. But anyway, collateral damage. 9/11 was an inside joke. The Shield channel says there are at least two big jokes hiding in plain sight on the official world map. America looks like a duck, and Antarctica looks like a brain. And a literalist says rocket science and rocket surgeons. You know, I was just watching some movie, I think it was a series. It was called Brand New Cherry Flavor, about this 1990s filmmaker who gets screwed over by a director and consults a witch, gets revenge. Very interesting stuff. I mean, there's a lot of quality programming. Anyway, one of the bad guys in it says it's not rocket surgery. You know, kind of a. I was like, that's, you know, it sounds better than it's not rocket science, because rocket science is not rocket science. Rocket science is movie magic and acting. So I'm going to start saying it's not rocket surgery. Jay Diggs says camcorders were not as convenient as cell phone cams. Why was he videotaping traffic? Yeah, you know what? That's an important point too. When we look at PSYOPs today, everybody has a phone. If you trip and fall on a subway, people are going to videotape you. If you start getting attacked, people are going to videotape you. If something goes down, terror attack, whatever, they will videotape you. It's just how it works these days. So we're used to this total surveillance society because we've just been acclimated to it. But when 9/11 happened, it wasn't like that. Not at all. It was more like a lot of people still decided, I'm not going to be tracked by the government until 9/11 happened. Then everybody bought one. So they had a lot of creative control, is my point. Skyfish says, this is wild. I bet there's tons of footage like that that's not released. Well, look, my take on that piece is I think that was a plant, that they have a lot of planted footage, and that they only selected the ones that they needed to create the composite that they wanted. And that his job was to catch it at that moment from that angle, and he did his job, and also probably include that inside joke. Infinite Plane Trotter says 1968 to 2001 is 33 years. The towers were completed in 68. I think their construction began in 68, and I think they completed and opened on 4/4, I got to double check. 73? I don't know if that's exactly it, but I know it was 33 years from creation to destruction, if you want to look at it that way. And it makes sense. 9/11, the national emergency number, was established in 1968. So we had 33 years of dialing 9/11 for emergencies before 9/11 happened. 13 years after the buildings go down, the new one opens on 11/3/2014. 13 is the number of the Phoenix death resurrection, and it's 1,776 feet high. 1776, which is 888 times 2, which you get into the meaning of the stuff, and it all makes perfect sense. It's a long-term ritual, and the language of it tells you that these things were built to be pulled down in that manner on that date before they were it was known before they were even built. It wasn't like this was some scheme that George W. Bush came up with. This wasn't some thing that they just dreamed up, like running up to the 2000s. No, this was actually obviously scripted before. You can find predictive programming for 9/11 in Doctor Strangelove, 1963. You can find predictive programming for 9/11 in Full Metal Jacket and in The Shining. I'm talking about Kubrick. Like, this was something that was planned a long time ago, and predictive programming is part of their process of conditioning you to accept what's coming as inevitable, as likely, no matter how incredible. Now, now let me check on that date, on the opening date. The reason why I thought it was interesting, World Trade Center opening date, because we talked about the Pentagon and how it started on 9/11. Yeah, so the World Trade Center officially opened on 4/4/73, and 4/4, of course, was the date Trump was brought in, and it was coincidentally the anniversary of MLK's assassination, who was compared to Moses, and then Trump has since been promoted from Jesus to Moses. Pentagon construction, 9/11. Again, 1941. So 60 years to the day. Nicotrama says, trying to listen to this with a 5-year-old is like trying to wrestle. Yeah, I believe it. You can get the replay, though. And the replays are going to be at infiniteplane.live. Just get on the newsletter. I'll send the archives out, but then also we're going to have the 24/7 on. Okay, continuing here. I want to go through my notes. I didn't want to go through the entire Secret Sun article. I need to finish reading it. But I just wanted to point out that there is something here between this Barbie and Oppenheimer and this link. I want to watch the movies before I get too much deeper into it. But the next thing I have to get to, and this was sent to me by Mr. Trustworthy. This is a big deal, I think. The 3 charged with assault over a wild WWE-style attack on the Alabama dock worker. So back to this Alabama fight and this question as to whether or not it was real. You can look here. One of the characters is actually wearing stripes just like a ref, which is both Masony and very much part of why people say it looked like World Wrestling Federation or Entertainment. But then get this. The guy the 16-year-old kid who swam across the river, he's got one shoe on, or one slipper on. And his username on Instagram and it's the King Jabber 77. So you have the King name again. And I mentioned the guy with the chair, Reggie Gray. And Reggie Gray, the name Reggie made me think of Reginald Denny. And I think the connection here is strong because we're talking about Rodney King. And Reggie means king. And the Rodney King was incited because of the Rodney King beating is what incited the LA riots, which came to a close after Reginald Denny, the name Reggie again, gets hit on the head. So you have the white and the black, the person getting hit on the head. All this stuff seems like callbacks. But anyway, King Jabber 77 has this picture. Here he is with one foot in a slipper, one with a shoe, and it says, the operative Mason's lodges, there was a custom of requiring a newly indentured apprentice to hand over his left shoe to confirm his obligation. Now that's kind of an interesting one because we always wondered why are we always seeing a single shoe at every psyop? What's with all these shoes in every picture? And it seems to be symbolic or representative of something. So here's a post explaining it. The men were white and the guard was a black man. Physical altercation. The young man named Aaron Rudolph swam across the water to help the guard. The other black, and he's only talking about this in racial terms because this is how it's been described. And he's suggesting that this is all black and white, symbolic in the Masonic sense. Here we go. The other black people joined the brawl and hit the men with chairs. Was this a real altercation or was it staged? The video didn't go viral by accident. Montgomery is where the bus boycott started in 1955 with Rosa Parks. Now on this, I saw a meme and it said, "Have a seat, 1955, Rosa Parks. Have a seat, 2023, with Reggie Gray hitting somebody with a chair." And Reggie Gray hitting somebody with a chair, chairman, was 42. Is 42. Rosa Parks, when she had a seat, was 42. So there's some rhyming here. And then Trump even said something about, you guys are fighters. You're going to fight, fight, fight. They will see. Like Trump was actually talking about how the people there in Alabama were ready to fight. And then this happens right after. The post here goes on to say, there's a lot of historical racism in Alabama. I think this might be a staged event to fan racial flames. The teenage boy Rudolph has an Instagram account. He has a shirt that looks like a Skull and Bones reference. He has a picture of hooded individuals that looks like a Masonic cult posted on 3/3. He has a missing sock in the video. Looks to be a Masonic reference. Was this an initiation? Reports have called this a WWE style attack, hinting that it's fake. Why else use the WWE reference? When videos like this are in the media, you must use your critical thinking skills. The media likes racial tension, and they use television for social conditioning. They feed off your negative energy to promote anger, resentment, and hatred. They control the masses through their emotions. The media loves keeping the people on low vibes. This is another divide and conquer, mind control, staged event. Have you figured it out yet? Interesting points raised here. Just bring it up for your perusal, and here you go. The 16-year-old who swam across the river to be a hero echoes back again to that story back in the spring where the 16-year-old rang the wrong doorbell and then he was shot. And here's the connection here, I think, is this. A 16-year-old shot by homeowner after ringing doorbell. This is back in April. The 84-year-old white man accused... Oh, 84. Interesting. For a couple of reasons. But the 84 was a big reference we were looking at. And the idea of the 8/4 date and this potential shooting. Anyway, this is all back from April. We were talking about the 16-year-old who rang the wrong doorbell and got shot. And so it's a 16-year-old black kid, old white man. The grandson of the white man who shot a black teen gave an interview, and he said that his grandfather got really into Trump. This was another part of the story. So the grandson went on the news, and he said there were warning signs. I wasn't shocked when I held the news. I knew he held racist tendencies and beliefs. So this is this individual dishing out on his grandfather. His grandfather hasn't even been tried yet. You're innocent until proven guilty, but he's like, yeah, he was an old racist. Anyway, I know in here they blame Trump. And yeah, it goes in here. His grandfather supported extreme right-wing views and conspiracy theories. Oh, conspiracy theories. He was a conspiracist. They love that. You're a conspiracist. So if you put it all together with this Alabama thing, the 16-year-old going as a hero this time, I think this is all just elaborate, meta-scripted storytelling over a period of months. And again, they do it for social control and conditioning. Going through some comments here, make sure I haven't missed anything. 6079 Smith says, Jordan's last game was Trump's 42nd birthday. Okay, now Trump's 42nd birthday was an interesting one. When he turned 42, they had a UFO. They had a UFO descend from the ceiling, and they had fireworks. 1988, Trump celebrated his 42nd birthday at one of his casinos, featuring a laser show and a 15-foot spaceship, with magicians and dancers performing to Michael Jackson's Bad, reworked in his honor. I would like to see a video of this because I believe the lyrics were changed. But anyway, I thought this was fascinating because here you have Trump and the 42 thing, and of course the alien spaceship, which 42 has all these connections with the Space Needle and the idea of ascension into the heavenly realm in this new modern context. And then of course it's Trump, and then 42. You know, UFO adds to 42 if you want to get into the gematria, but there are so many things we can go into with this particular piece of information, but I want to stay on topic. We've been covering the Margot Babylon thing. Then we see this buildup of resentment for the FBI shooting this guy with a gun. And, you know, the whole gun control agenda is moving in some very interesting directions right now. And this can't be disconnected from this. And people are remarking that the FBI has ignored threats before when they come from lefties, you know, like Kathy Griffin and the severed Trump head, or Madonna talking about blowing up the White House, or Johnny Depp asking when the last time someone assassinated a president. But then you have this guy who posts some things on the internet, and yeah, he gets shot. But in the defense of the FBI, if you believe the official story, the guy did upload some pretty extreme comments, and he was dressed up in full battle gear. I mean, I'm just like, what do you expect? He invited the swatting. Thinks he's a penguin says, I thought it was weird one of the guys named arrested was Shipman. Yes, Chase Shipman. And he was the guy that was chased away. Angle of Elevation says, in War of the Worlds, we stopped the aliens with a virus. Now that the government has admitted aliens are real, I surely hope we have a deadly virus to stop them from invading. Fascinating. That is true, though. And same with Independence Day. They used a computer virus to shut it down. Will Smith saved us. And Independence Day was directed by Roland Emmerich, and it gave us a lot of the visuals we would need to understand 9/11, in that we were supposed to gather around the president. Because in that movie, the aliens destroy all the buildings and the cities, and then the president saves us. And it's notable that Roland Emmerich directed Moonfall, the 2021 film about the moon falling on us, because it gave us a lot of visuals that we'll need to comprehend the idea of space junk when China starts, or Russia, whoever, starts shooting down the 42,000 CubeSats. NA Literalist says, what if an Uber driver rings the wrong doorbell on a house? You know, before this happened, and it might have been a hoax, I mean, I'm inclined to think these things are all connected, even on a national level. There was a local incident where an Uber driver went to the wrong house here and got shot. So now I see them with big bright Uber signs on their windows. Salty Siren says 42 descend upon the earth the fall. Yes. Well, look, 42 has everything to do, I believe. Well, I have some new stuff on this as well. But you have the number 42 and 24. Both of these can be references, in my view, to Saturn. And you can get the astrological symbol of Saturn by combining the two. But the Space Needle has been a focus here because the Space Needle is actually designed to be a UFO. And I think it represents the same thing that the old obelisks represent, which is ascension into the heavenly realm. And of course the UFOs, they descend, and these are your saviors from above. But the number and what it represents, Saturn and falling, is tied into all of these things. The Space Needle being in Washington, which is the 42nd state, and it's a 42-second ride to the top. The UFO on the Space Needle's 42 meters wide. Like the code is throughout, and it's very, very consistent. And it's the same reason why we see it throughout Elon Musk's projects. Here's a reference point to that thing about the domestic terrorists. Ex-Capitol Police Chief thinks multiple federal agents were in the January 6th crowd. There were 19 domestic terrorists at January 6th being tracked by the FBI. 3 days later, on the day of the riot, the number of domestic terrorists by the FBI they were tracking went up to 19. So 19 terrorists, January 6th, again 19, 9/11, 33-year-old leader, Muhammad Atta, 33-year-old leader, QAnon shaman. In terms of just the blatant visuals of it, it's like, who's the leader here? Well, it's the guy who sits in Nancy Pelosi's chair with the big headdress on. Okay, moving forward here. And one more thing about the wrong doorbell. That happened in a few places all at once, and it was being commented on widely. And then it stopped happening. Like they do this, they build up their narratives for a psyop to get some kind of legislation passed, and then they move on to the next thing. But it's not actually real most of the time, generally speaking. Like whatever it is they're hyping, more often than not, it's not real. And I noticed something else too. After the Allen, Texas shooting, there was a guy with a cowboy hat who claimed that he was first on the site and that he was rolling bodies to see who was alive and a girl didn't have a face. And then he gave CPR and he saved a life. There's all these, he's like a hero. Well, then the Allen Police Department, the APD, puts out a press release saying this guy is not credible. He's not a credible witness. What do you mean he's not a credible witness? He was on all the mainstream outlets, and his story was repeated in all of the big newspapers and all of the popular left-wing podcasts, and not one of them offered a retraction. So the propaganda of the girl without a face has already cemented itself in history, even though it's being called fake by the police, because somewhere within that department, somebody not in the know didn't get the memo. Like today, we're going to take some false reports from these guys because we are running a psyop. And that's an important consideration whenever we talk about psyops. We're not talking about a rogue news agency or small group hoaxing people. These are all top-down events that would require cooperation at levels that go up to the top of the media corporations and include government. I think the term is capstone event. Wolfgang Halbig used to describe these. J. Digg says 42 months or 1,260 days is prevalent in the book of Revelation. Fascinating. Now, if you want to call in on any of the topics, tonight we've talked about Musk versus Zuck. Is that going to be fake or real? I think we know it's going to be fake. Can you imagine, like, Musk with a bloody nose? What do you think is going to happen? There's no way. Size-wise, Musk has him beat. I don't know if anything else really matters. Second, Barbie Barbie is Miss Satan, and it's idol worship. That's just the long and short of it. They're not just Barbie dolls. It's not about feminism. It's actually about some kind of occult connection with a spiritual or demonic entity that takes up residence in an idol that's symbolically linked to it. And this is all that Kabbalistic magic. So in other words, burn your Barbie dolls if you don't want your children growing up worshiping at the altars of Mystery Babylon. But if they're in the movie theaters, they already are. You're in the black cube. We're born into this. You can't really fault anybody. Infinite Plane Trotter says, my money is on Musk. I could see Musk, body slamming him, because I think that Zuck is training. I think he's training for like the ground game or something. I don't know. We'll see. They're not going to be slugging it out. I don't think Musk has the endurance. And Zuck is also, if you believe the videos, he looks fake. I'm sorry. He's never looked real to me, the Zuckerberg. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say. I had new information on this. The symbol of the planet Saturn. This is from Wikipedia Astrological Symbols. And I've been saying that the number 42 represents Saturn, and that the 4 is the cross, and the 2 is the scythe of Saturn. Well, here's the actual interpretation, and I don't think I'm off anyway. Wikipedia.com/astrological_symbols. Symbol of Saturn represents matter, which is the cross, taking precedence over the spirit, which is the crescent. So we were talking about how the number 42 represents falling or descent, and I think it means the descent of light into the material realm, which is represented by the black cube. And the number 4 is the cross, and a cube is just it's a folded up cross, but these are symbols that represent this realm. Like Christ crucified on the cross is essentially bound to the cube, bound to the realm. And then the number of transcendence, 33, which was his age, is the age that you transcend matter. So if the 42 represents this, the domination of the spirit by matter, then the 33 in the ascension is pretty much the opposite, the overcoming of matter. But this is, again, this is the God of the world. They represent it in various ways. And when I say God of the world or Baal worship, I mean quite literally the earth god and the God of the harvest, which is what the Grim Reaper thing really represents. We're talking about cycles of life and death, the God of recycling, reincarnation. That's why it was 13 years after the towers fell that they opened a new one. 13 is their number of death/new cycle. Going through some comments here. Oh yes, Jeff Bezos' house didn't burn in Maui from what I saw. It might be a rumor though, it came from CBK News. But he's got a clock. Jeff Bezos has a 42, is that number? $42 million clock in the Devil Mountains, Sierra Diablo Mountains. $42 million clock that's going to last 10,000 years. And I think 10,000 represents the return of Saturn, which is 10,000 days. And then the clock itself is chronos, or time. Again, it's all the same. They have all their clever ways of paying homage and worshiping the god of this realm, the god of the time-space, the god of the Abrahamic religions. And if you look at the symbol of Saturn in any of these ancient depictions, you got Kronos eating his child. Well, it's not about cannibalism. Kronos eats the 12 children and then spits them out at the end of the year. It represents the 12 months. Father Time, Grim Reaper. It's just allegory, and these are personifications. But the Kronos eating the child is one, but the other common one is Saturn with a knife or a scythe killing a baby or stabbing a kid. And it's like, well, what are you seeing here? It looks grotesque. And when you look at this as allegory, it makes a lot more sense. It's just all symbolic. But the Abrahamic faiths are based on Abraham. And Abraham, if you look at the depictions of him, you have him taking Isaac to the top of the hill and he's about to stab him. And I would posit here that Abraham about to stab Isaac is actually just a depiction of Saturn in a new iteration, in this new cultural context. Here's an article from XX1133122111, one of the channels that was predicting that Trump would get a head wound on 8/4. He put a compilation of what he called Rocket Men, and this is a fascinating collection, and I think these are worth going through. We've discussed all of them, and I have some I can add to it. Donald Trump called Kim Jong-un, leader of North Korea, Rocket Man during his first term, and he tweeted about him. I spoke with President Moon of South Korea last night, asked him how Rocket Man is doing. Now, Rocket Man, Kim Jong-un, was born on January 8th. January 8th is the same birthday as Elvis Presley and David Bowie. Interesting as we go forward here. Now, I'm not going to read all of this, but I just mainly want to focus on these connections. David Bowie releases a song like a Rocket Man. He's got his black star. And in the Elvis movie, twice he talks about riding the rocket, no, riding a rocket to the Rock of Ages, whatever the hell that means. But now here's what's interesting. We're getting into the part that I want to add on to. You have Elton John, Rocket Man, who put out a movie, Rocket Man. Elton John released his hit song, and recently a movie about his life was released entitled Rocket Man. The same black star as Elvis, Kim Jong un's North Korean flag, and David Bowie's album cover Black Star. Now, this is what I'm finding to be kind of trippy, though. Jack Parsons is mentioned here as well, and he was a rocket man. So I think what we're seeing, as I've been saying before, that the rocket is just a restylized obelisk. Here it gives you some more information on Parsons, rocket engineer and chemist. And this is before rocket science was CGI, like they were actually blowing things up. He was the founder and inventor of the first jet propulsion rocket engine. He abandoned Marxism studies to follow Aleister Crowley. He was recognized by Crowley and the Agape Lodge leader in 1942. So he was the American counterpart of Aleister Crowley. And again, he looks like Doctor Strange, or Doctor Strange looks like him. Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard performed their Babylon Working series of ceremonies in January to March 1946. And this whole ceremony actually has connections to Donald Trump. Like some think that he was the vessel that whatever they summoned went to go inhabit, that he is the Antichrist. I mean, it's an interesting connection we might get into later. These rituals were designed to manifest these energies on the earth. There's a novel about this called Moonchild by Aleister Crowley. Now we're looking at these rocket men and what the rocket means. And it means, essentially, I think, especially with Elvis, it makes it very clear in Bowie. So if you remember when when Elon Musk sent the Starman to space, it was playing a David Bowie song on repeat, Starman, which has everything to do with the star, or Saturn, I think, the black sun, all these things. So he goes up into space, Starman, in the Tesla Roadster. And Starman is an anagram for Mr. Satan, and Bowie is the man who fell to Earth. If you just called, you can call right back. I accidentally hung up on you. So Bowie's the man who fell to Earth. And I think that that's what the rock star archetype represents. Fallen angels, or Satan. We'll get back to this. Hey, what's up, caller?
Hey, what's going on there? Caller.
Just going through a few interesting blogs that I found today.
Are we live here?
Yeah, we are live here. And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Pennsylvania.
Okay, and what are you calling about in particular?
The Ohio. Here is the heart of everything, Ohio.
Yes, where you had your toxic airborne
I
event.
think they changed. I think they changed their logo.
The slogan.
It's no longer the heart of everything. They got a new logo, not logo, but
Slogan. The slogan was changed to the heart of everything in 1984. And I think it just represented something symbolically about the heart of America in the MAGA view. And what they were showing was MAGA just had a heart, or the vision of MAGA. The old America is dying. It's unregulated. It's greedy and bloated and needs to be phased out. That was the message of it. But what else about Ohio is going on right now?
well, like I said, they just changed their logo. It's not the heart is here or something.
Let me take a look and see. Okay, Ohio's slogan: with God, all things are possible. Oh no, yeah, no. I found it here. It says Ohio, the heart of it all. It returned to its old tourism logo
It's
this
not
year.
that.
It changed back to it this year. Here's from Cincinnati.com. May 10th, 2023, Ohio returned to its old slogan, the heart of it all. So they just switched it back just in time for all these psyops which reference the heart and ultimately lead to this idea of America having clogged arteries represented by derailed trains and capitalism run amok.
All right, now, Tim, you know I run into Ohio every day. Every 5 days, I run into my what I do for my work, and yeah, that slogan has changed. It's not the heart of it all anymore.
Now, were you anywhere near Palestine when the train derailed and you had that massive black cloud?
Was I close to it? No. You know where I was at.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You drove in.
Yeah, I had to drive into it.
Well, whatever their
I
new
had to
slogan
drive in
is,
through a. Go ahead.
no, whatever the slogan is, the purpose of that psyop, in my view, was actually to kill the Griswolds. The Griswolds, the whole,
Oh, I
if you watch that movie White Noise, you'll immediately get what I'm talking about.
have not watched that yet, but I do 100% agree with you that it's a bunch of BS. I
Fake.
went there. There was nothing going on there.
No, and I had
Now,
people, there were people freaking out saying that the fish are dying. There was this AI generated news site that said that the Mississippi River Valley was now poisoned. And
I, 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 I went there, Tim. I put my hand in the creek, and I dropped my phone in there actually. And no, the fish were not dying. Let's not go there. That's It's not as bad as what they're trying to say it is. What is it? Something real? Probably something real happened there.
no, well, what happened was a really good movie. I mean, White Noise was probably used to act. Look, I mean, we already talked about this a million
Yeah, I
times,
didn't
but
watch that movie.
no, the thing is, the actors, the extras in that movie were actually evacuated when the real derailment happened. And this was commented on by CNN as just a coincidence. And I'm like, no, obviously life follows psyops, or psyops follow
Well,
life, or what? How does it work? We got to update this thing because it raises a few questions, about what causes what, or and they say it's eerie
well,
coincidence, but I'm like, no, it's conditioning.
however you want to say it, it doesn't matter. I mean, I was there. I was at Ground Zero with the whole Ohio train thing. I have family that lives there, and they really do believe that this thing happened. So I mean, I got kind of both sides. Our side that says no, this was a psyop, and their side that says no, it's something happened.
Well, the difference is this:
So
they believe something happened, and I don't believe. I know something happened that was televised. That
I don't believe either.
so the difference, though, is this: is that the masses are a bunch of believers, and they fight over beliefs. And I'm just saying that beliefs are worthless and impotent, and that they're there to distract you from actually knowing what's going on. And that's what separates what we have been doing here is we're separating knowledge from just subjective belief. I don't live in TV land. I don't live in a Netflix movie, but apparently the masses do.
Wow, we know you don't believe in TV land. I don't either.
But sad we have to say that. Like my frame of reference isn't this fictional construct, which I call the world stage. But I'm entertained by it nonetheless. It's just immersive entertainment. But we're surrounded by true
Oh, would it?
believers.
It's definitely entertainment. As an IPR reporter, I go out there and I'm just looking for everything that they are faking. Uh, I'm in Pittsburgh, and they did that whole thing with this Bowers guy.
What is that about?
Oh, the Bowers guy who shot up the synagogue here like 7 years ago or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, I believe it was.
Why did it take like 7, 8 years to put an end to it?
I'm pretty sure the rabbi there was Gene Rosen, repackaged like a new gig. But and look, for anybody who finds it in poor taste that we're entertained by the psyop entertainment complex, or that we find it entertaining, I read this article today by a doctor who's like 101, and he was talking about one of the things that has allowed him to remain in control of his mental faculties is he's always found things to be entertained by, things to be intrigued by. But entertainment is engagement, and I think we have to remain engaged. I don't believe in tuning out. I don't think we can go off the grid. I think that the approach that we have makes a lot more sense, for long-term sanity. Imagine how lost. I mean, I just look back at how lost I was. Not lost, but at the time I didn't know. But clearly, I was just believing whatever I heard from whatever sources I could get it from. I had some critical thinking, obviously, but I accepted a lot of things just as sort of a baseline. I even recall seeing the Earth from the ISS on a big screen TV, on a roommate's TV, and I couldn't understand why they were impressed by it, but it didn't strike me as fake. I just thought
Well,
it was boring.
don't do that. I mean, ISS from your friend's TV. We all know that's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, now we
Come
do.
on.
Now we do. Now we do. At the time, no way. You would have had no frame
No.
of reference where it didn't exist.
Well, I'm calling you out, Tim. Thank you for all of the ISS bullshit.
Well, look, the biggest debunk for anybody, look at the spacewalks and look at the lighting.
That's the biggest debunk.
The lighting underwater, it's underwater lighting. You can tell. Like when light is underwater. Hey, I got another call coming in. So if you want to call back in a bit, feel free.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah, I'll call back in a
Good
bit.
talking to you. All right. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey Tim, it's Pete Trippa. How you doing?
Excellent. Very interesting
How's-
times.
Always. I'm calling in about Maui. I don't know what's the conversation about tonight. Is it open phones or is there a direct conversation about something?
Anything. We've had a caller from Maui, and that's obviously been a topic
Oh
as of
really?
late. So yeah, absolutely. It's what's your take on it?
Okay. Well, so if just let me know if you can't hear me or anything. So I'm on other channels, and of course, the fringe here is a little bit more balanced and trustworthy, obviously at IPS. But I think it's really interesting how people catch the bait of the DEW weapons, or whatever they're called. Right? Isn't that stand for direct energy weapon or something like that? And
Yes,
that's tied
direct
to
energy
9/11 and all
weapons.
that stuff.
Yeah, I see that. I'm like, why do they fall for that immediate bait? Because they can discredit that.
I
And
think it's hilarious. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So, and I think that's that's a good example of the guard railing that you speak of. We're supposed to experience it. Now, I'm still stuck in whether these events either have to happen or they are pushed to happen by the elites, or they naturally happen. So now that goes into a bunch of different categories that I probably won't go into today, but the burning, decimation, obliteration, which is representative of a nuclear attack, I think that's something to talk about on the show tonight. I mean, I don't know if you already did this, but August is nuclear. It's nukes fall, things burn, things blow up in August. I don't know why. I don't know, or they remember Brazil? When did
No, you're right.
I didn't really
It
do
was
any research.
it was Beirut.
When did Brazil? Yeah, yeah.
Beirut in 2020, you had the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and those two bombings were echoed by two August mushroom cloud blasts. And it was a thing in August. And it is a theme right now, it seems like. You're onto something with this. And it does seem kind of funny that here we are talking about Barbie, a bombshell. And the whole bikini comes from Bikini Island, and the bombshell is a reference to the bomb testing at the Bikini Islands. So you have this correlation between the islands and the nuclear tests, and I think there's something here. I think there's something here to.
100%, 100%. It comes across in the news. You know, here in New England, it's like, oh, you know, it's so far away, no one really feels, you know, the pain of it. You know, so I'm sure other people experience it that way too. You know, I don't really know anyone in Maui per se, so to many people, it's quote just a fire. Right? I'm pretty sure it's similar to what other people may have felt like during World War II. It's just, all right, maybe that I'm kind of saying too much there, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, here's something
like,
too.
okay, yeah, a bomb fell. You know what I mean?
One of the main culprits, and I predicted this before I even opened up any of the articles, is that they're going to use this to blame climate change. And the reason why climate change is significant here is, like the nukes, it represents a global threat that requires a global solution. So I would think, from the Metascript perspective, it would make more sense to blame it on climate change than a nuke. Because if somebody's nuking everybody, they take that person out. But if climate change is happening, we have to solve climate change. So maybe they decided this makes more sense.
I mean, in the state of Massachusetts, I mean, there's a lot of hypnotized, mesmerized people here. There are some people who get it a little bit, but it's tough, you know, because everyone's pigeonholed into the two sides. You know, you're either red or you're blue or whatever. So they don't think that there's another way out of the rabbit hole. This concept of climate change is pervasive. It's catching on so much here that I've never heard people say, "Oh, Biden's done so much for this climate change than any other." I'm like, wait a second. Let's bring what president has ever done anything? Like, it's so, I don't know, just to take a political stance on anything related to climate change, it's so immeasurable. I went to school for physics. It's so that's not a great example, but it's like that. I'm just saying it's so impossible. It's so difficult. I'll just say it this way. It's so difficult to measure how one cow fart can measure, can influence, a whole
it can drown a polar bear. It can cause an ice cap.
Right.
It's the melting of the ice caps caused by this. And ultimately,
Right.
though, it's blaming capitalism. But I think what you're bringing up here is that you have the idea of science, where you can attach it to facts, and then you have this, where they put the burden on you. The onus is on you to believe it, and then to get appropriately angry. And if you don't believe it, they get mad at you.
To blindly believe whatever the news tells us, and that's where I have found that either here at IPS or other groups related in some way, shape, or form to IPS. I'm sorry to say, I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. You have to go out. You have to see. You have to go into different rooms or whatever. But to have this month of August be like a month of, let's say, devastation, there has to be some cyclical event, like clockwork, that they know is going to happen, that they can predict, and that they know that they can influence, and just say, okay, yeah, maybe the sun was hot enough. I'm just using this as an example. I don't know if the sun...
I think you might be onto something. I came across this thing today where somebody correlated, because we're on the final day of the dog days of summer, which is the dog star Sirius behind the sun. And according to the occultists, this means that the sun's power is magnified. And on the 8th of August, this alignment occurs. There's like some kind of a portal, they say, but it's the alignment of Orion's belt with Sirius. So you have this alignment with the sun, and that seems to correlate with the timing of this fire. So there may be, and look, we had a random big fire lighting up part of the city here, and then a random fire to the west, and it could be coincidental, but I've observed enough correlations between summer solstice and fires that I started to think, okay, we got to look to see if this is part of a bigger
Yes.
pattern.
Yes, it is. You're hitting the nail on the head, and that's what I'm trying. I'm probably a little bit more woo-woo in the sense that maybe fires like this are supposed to happen, and I tend to believe that, although I try to take a more of an IPS balanced approach where, whatever. But I want to believe that they're supposed to happen, right? And that's where the elites become, and this is where I'm calling myself out. I'm a little bit glowy in this respect. Like, I think that they are the good guys in the sense that they can't let us know the true nature of where we are, who we are, and why we're here. But they can lie to us just enough. It's like a parent with their children. Like, you just don't want to tell them that Santa Claus is fake, And I'm taking this quite quite seriously, actually, Tim. And I'm saying, like, I think the elites really do know. Maybe not. I actually don't think that Bill Gates knows the true nature, but there are people above him that do know that this is either a flat plane or some version of a realm that they know more about, kind of like the vibes of Cosmos kind of version that we talk about often here, where, something like the Earth goes through like an icing and cooling, or I should say heating and cooling stage, like a clock, right? But I think that these things are supposed to happen at a specific time of year, and they know it. And maybe the Bill Gateses do know the clockwork function of it, but they don't know the why, or how we're even here. I mean, this is really like, so we've talked about how we, in some cases, we're philosophical scientists, and this is a real existential question, but we don't know why exactly we are here, and I think that's the control part and why they need to cover it up, because if even like, I think you said this a couple nights ago, if even like 10% of the globe figured it out, it's over. It's like a domino. It's how Tim Ferriss, I don't know if you ever heard of Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week. I'm big into personal development, but like he calls it the big domino in marketing. You just tell your followers or your whatever, just your big. Once you figure out the big domino, the rest of the dominoes they fall right in place, or they're just irrelevant. And what I'm trying to say with that is, like, the elites try to guard or guardrail the big domino. The second people start searching, I mean, I'm a little iffy on the dome concept. I'm a little bit on your side with the infinite plane. I think that's a good open notebook kind of way to, but who's to say that, like, what happened in Maui is what the concept of obliteration or fire and brimstone that's supposed to happen at this time of year? Who's to say?
Okay, look, this is intriguing to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember
It's a lie.
Okay, November 3rd, 2019, 3,000 of us live were watching Seattle because we were convinced that they were going to, based on predicted programming, blow up the Space Needle. Didn't happen, we were watching, but at the same time, there was a big Space Needle in Turkey that mysteriously blew up. And we were like, okay, do they have like a set date for things to happen? And we spoiled this particular one. It just got me thinking about this. And I have noticed that you will find a lot of the big psychological operations, the big sporting events, actually comport with these older religious calendars that are based on the movements of the sun and the period of time of the year that we're at. Like, not a coincidence that that submersible drama happened as we entered into Cancer and we hit the summer solstice. So yeah, they're definitely timing psychodramas and major events, even fires, to go along with what I would consider to be pagan holidays. And so what I think there's a correlation here,
Wow.
but why are they doing it? And this is what I'm pointing out is like, okay, they're doing it based on the same calendar, but why? And that's a good question. Are they is this it's fascinating to me. I don't have all the answers, but I think it's an old system.
Well, on a smaller scale, a lot of those things like the turkey, explosion, that there was a fringe story related to that back when it happened, that it uncovered some underground tunnels. Now, that could be mud flood theory. That could be, or I should say, human trafficking kind of stuff. It could be because they did talk about a lot of those things. If you have your finger on the pulse and you start seeing this stuff, it almost like kind of rhymes every year. And after, for me, year 3, it doesn't even faze me. So the clockwork part, I think we need to nail that down. Someone in the chat, in the Discord or the Gilded, has, it's either you or someone else, has really ironed out a lot of the calendar, events. But it's still, I think the elite still manipulate it. So I mean, it's good. It's good to be aware of that.
What do you think of my concept that the nuclear bomb, because I don't believe these exist in the way they describe them, but what do you think about my idea that the introduction of this mega weapon reset geopolitics and it gave the power elite total control over our collective worldview? That they blew up objective reality. They literally destroyed our reality at every level with the fake bomb for all
In
intents
what
and
way?
purposes. Well,
What, through the movies, or
no,
what do you mean?
yeah, well, by convincing us that it's real, by faking it convincingly, they managed to use that to put everybody into a collective hostage situation, like the Cold War or the nuclear
Right.
threat.
It's already believable. It's already happened. Millions of people have either died or have been injured. It's to the sense where it's in the history books. I understand that. It's so tough to remove to unplug. I mean, it's almost like we're using like we're pigeonholed to use like matrix terminology, but I hate that now. But to really like remove our thinking from that idea or concept that almost nearly all historical events or some version of them have been lied to us, like the Hiroshima bombings, Nagasaki, whatever it is, 9/11, as fake planes, like, no, we're good. People cannot, to be removed from that, you really have to understand that Santa isn't fake. You really have to say, okay, it's not just Santa. It's literally everything. Everything that we've been told to is a lie, and now we have to kind of go into the existential is why. And that's where, I don't know, when it comes to what you were just saying about like the burning or the timing and whatever, you're right. It's like, I don't know, it's like they have to match up their actions with the clock or the timing just to appeal to a higher power or what? I don't know. I have no clue. I mean, I have an idea, but
My idea
it's not the point where
my best guess, I'll say, is based on looking at the theory and practice of magic in the microcosm, because it seems that it's working on a mass scale. And the theory of it in the microcosm is that the magician or the priest or whatever is for the context of the ritual. They are turning the ritual chamber itself into a microcosm of the universe, where they are the sun and the moon. Or so basically, you're talking about this idea of sympathetic magic, where they're imitating on Earth what's happening up above, and in doing so, it supposedly gives them power to influence what's to come. And that every person in the room is like a battery, adding a little more power to this overall ritual. And based on my reading on it, the people who are merely batteries don't have to know the meaning of what's spoken or the symbols. So, in other words, we may be looking at what you would term, I think, sympathetic magic, and that we may be looking at actual magical rituals performed in public for the sole purpose of directing our co-creative capacities as sentient beings in a universe that is somehow malleable to human consciousness and steer it towards their model. In other words, a reality monopoly, a monopoly on creation. I mean, that's one possible
So,
explanation. If
so with that in mind, Tim, why would they release, for instance, artificial intelligence into that mass, which you just spoke about? Why would they, because that is another magical thing. I mean, it's a powerful tool, yes. We use it in art, science, math, marketing, copywriting. It's huge. But in essence, it's a tool, and it's like a magic wand. It literally is a very powerful magical tool where I'm convinced that, I don't know, that the whole artificial intelligence concept is, I want to say it's not real, or if it is truly something that's a powerful engine, that it has been around for quite some time. Meaning two things: that it is either a natural occurrence, that people naturally, like, because you ever had that moment where you think of the same thing as like your best friend or something like that, or you say the same words at the same time,
sure, I've had
like finish each other's sentences.
yes,
You know,
premonitions or intuitions with other people.
That's how quick. Yeah, that's how quick artificial intelligence is like operating. It's weird. It's like finishing our sentences, and I think it's two things. It's either like man-made thing, like whatever, or it's like a natural, intuitive, like actual occurrence. Whether it's the silicone operating, the chips like operating at maximum capacity. I mean, it's so bizarre. It throws me for a loop sometimes, and I'm not sure if I've ever seen something like that in the Gilded chat or the Discord chat, but it's something that I think we need to ask ourselves.
I kind of think
whether this, yeah. Go ahead.
like, okay, well, we're in this new paradigm, right? They've given us a new God construct, a new devil for the atheists, even, with aliens being angels, all these replacements, and the only thing that seems to be missing is a God, like an actual, maybe even like a sentience that you can pray to. And I kind of think that maybe they're conditioning us for the introduction of what we accept to be a new higher power, objective authority, a super, like, in other words, I think that they may give us a fake God in the form of fake AI that they control.
Or steer us away from, well, all right, I'll say I'm on the fence about religion and spiritualism. I want to believe, like X-Files, I want to believe. Let's just say the concept of a higher power, or like a bigger machine. That's entirely possible. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's still possible to me, at least. I think there's something there that they are able to manipulate, and that. All right, I'm a broken record at this point, but they are steering us. I think there's definitely. I agree with you. They're steering us away from even questioning or believing a God, and even less so,
you mentioned and less
before. So ourselves.
But, like, look, I just watched Newsbenders, and this made me think of what you had mentioned this before, because you had suggested that maybe there's some kind of supercomputer, and I just wrote that off as, okay, no way. Now, Newsbenders says that their news stories that they use to bend our reality are ultimately written by some super intelligent computer. And that's a fascinating idea there, because it means that the authority above the people that are falsifying our worldview, our construct that we live in, that it's not even human, in other words.
Right. Yeah. You're right. We can't. We're supposed to believe that it's a power thing. Like to believe that we don't have the power within ourselves to create a better life for ourselves. Like we have to either. It's all on the surface level, by the way, they use this with the red versus blue, liberal versus conservative kind of stuff too. But on our level, we know that they are control. As long as they control the power, we'll always think that we're out of control. I don't know how else to say it, but it's like we're not convinced that we can change our future, or influence our future, or make better our own future. A lot of people wallow in the climate. We brought up climate change already in this conversation. Who's to say that we ourselves can't influence our own weather patterns? It's like, oh, I like rainy days, or I like really hot 110 days. I know that sounds weird, but I don't know. Some days, if it's really nice and dry and hot, that's not that bad. You know what I mean? So it's what you make of it. And when they take that away from you, it's like, okay, they just change the coloring on the weather board, and instead of, in 2000, the year 2000, it could be like, oh, the temperature is 80 and it looks like it's beautiful out. But now they'll show the weather is like 80 or 85, and it's like all red on the, the news channel. Like, oh my God, it's like really red. All you do is tweak the danger level, and it makes us feel like we're really in a bad spot and we're always trapped. When really, I don't know, maybe this is another thing. It's like I think we have a lot of influence on our own lives. We can change a lot about who we are, but whatever. It's not this conversation. But when it comes to the marketing aspect of it and the propaganda, they really are fucking with us. And I think we only knew if more than 5% or more than 10% of us knew, and just all the dominoes would just fall. We'd just be fast.
I call this the lie world order, because whatever it is, the answers aren't going to be found in the container they put us in.
Right.
And they know what's going on, and they lie, so we are in a world of lies. And so the answers aren't going to be in this narrow frame of reference, and it's going to be found in the areas that they consider to be out of bounds. And so you have to have this, what I consider to be the only authentic overview effect, what the astronauts fake to have, is the perspective that you have when you recognize that the collective consensus worldview is a very filtered interpretation of reality. It's not just on the level of opinions, but it's about cosmography, cosmogony.
Can we lean into the astronaut concept for a second because you brought something up a couple nights ago?
Levitation. I said the astronauts are levitating like the early Christian saints would, and that it's just a reintroduction of an old miracle, that they're elevated, they're high priests, and they can see God. We can't, but they can tell us what God looks like, and it's round and blue.
Right. You were talking a few nights ago how billionaires and everyone this is. There was one sentence where either it was from a news article that you were reporting on, or maybe it was your own opinion, but it was to go to space was the most highest form of what I read. Didn't you mention something like that? I think it was
Was it the article I was referencing where this individual was explaining that the highest secret of masonry is space travel, and that you have to go Mach 33. That's why it's 33 degrees, because that's what I was coming across the other night, and it was like, wow, this is heavy, that it's literally 33 times the speed of sound to escape Earth's gravity, to escape this realm, or to transcend. It's Mach 33. It's poetic, but it's inculcated into NASA's rituals.
Yes. I think one of the people on the Gilded or Discord broke down all the numbers recently, within the last week, of all the numbers related. It might have even been you, Tim, that broke down all the numbers relating to space, taking off, speed or whatever, and like how, every single number of every single aspect of it is related to some sort of Masonic, I don't know what you say, but it fascinated me. I mean, there's a lot of us that just read, and I know we're not like responding a lot, but man, I encourage everyone here, if you could spend 1 week just reading through the Gilded or the Discord conversations, it would blow your mind. It would just blow your mind.
Okay, let's do this
It
then.
was because you learn.
Tomorrow, for Infinite Plane Saturn Day, I'll scroll up like 3 days back in the Gilded, and we'll just scroll down and read it, because I think you're right.
Oh my God.
Because there's a lot of people who are just reading and sometimes emoting, but we are pooling together our best intel on these topics that are somewhat obscure, and we're finding some fascinating things, and I'm always looking for sources outside of our own think tank. That's why I cited the secretsun.blogspot today. I think it's important. We want to enlarge the pool of researchers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, there's been some smaller stories. I think, what was that fight? All right, this is my last thought, and I promise I'll go. There was a fight that we were kind of highlighting within the conversation recently. Did you break that down at all today? Because you don't have to, but like, do you remember what I'm talking about? It was like in Missouri,
Alabama, and
Alabama.
yeah. I was immediately I made these connections with okay, so the guy with the chair hitting people, they called him Chairman. His name is Reggie Gray, and I immediately think Reggie means king, Gray is black and white combined. He's 42, and he's hitting people with a chairman. And this harkens back to Alabama Rosa Parks, 42. So it's like 1953, have a seat. 2023, have a seat. And it's the same kind of dynamic in the
Okay.
But anyway, go on.
Okay, no, I have to pause you. Forgive me for interrupting you, but this is a concept I hope more people embrace, is a couple things. That shit happens daily all over the United States, maybe even the world. I don't know. Just crazy shit. Like when I used to live in D.C., all around New England, stuff like that, some shady places, stuff like that fight happens. It just happened to be on camera, and I think it was just so happens the names lined up. I don't know who's the director or the maestro of this charade, but it just fit a narrative, and they had to propagate it up or bubble it up to the surface so that everyone could see it. And I don't know why that part, but that's a part of the IPS that I think we zero in on some of these events when we don't even really have to. It's almost like like it's too much energy, because it could be anywhere. They're just specifically, maybe the sun or the moon or the stars were aligned in that spot, and they're like, okay, hey, what's going on that day in Alabama or Maui, let's say, and let's make that like a big story.
This one, I
onto something?
I saw this one and I thought, this is not even worth noting. It's not impressive. I don't know why anybody cares.
Yeah.
I ignored it, but then someone said, look, Trump was just there on 8/4 in Alabama, and he said they're ready to fight, you'll see. And so maybe they were like, let's look for something in Alabama so we can blame it on Trump.
Right.
And this came up conveniently. But then the guy's name, Chase Shipman, made me give it a second look. And then third look. And then the chair connection. And I'm like, watch there be a 42-year-old. And like the main character's 42. I'm like, okay, what are we looking at here?
Okay. Right. But Tim, I want to give the other alternative viewpoint that I was trying to convey, which is, I think, oh my gosh, now I'm like, I can go in so many different directions. But I think that it's also good to analyze these small-scale events because they are happening according to the clockwork anyways. Remember, I'm going back to what's supposed to happen, right, just in general in the realm. Now, I'm going to give a backup example. A few weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, there was like a big fake story which it at the beginning, in the Boston area. So I'm in New England. I'm in Boston. At the beginning, it seemed real. It was a police officer or a kid or someone found a boa constrictor, right? Small story. No one gives a F. And it became like a big story because what the hell is a boa constrictor loose in the neighborhood in the Boston area? It just made no sense. Well, it turns out days go by, people are concerned about it. Oh my God, is there a boa constrictor in my backyard? Whatever. It turns out to be fake. Okay? Moral of the story, if we analyze at the end of July, beginning of August, there's actually like that 13th zodiac sign, the snake. It's kind of comes after, Scorpio, I believe. I'm juggling the story a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. The snake is a big,
serpent. It's called serpent or serpentine, zodiac. It was denoted by NASA as the 13th zodiac. It only really shows up between I don't know, someone else in the chat is going to know. I think it's there's a bunch of guys in the chat that know this stuff better than I do, but I think it's a zodiac that occurs in between November and December or somewhere around that time. But the zodiac sign itself is kind of like in a certain position in the sky between the end of July and beginning of August kind of deal. So I think they do these small stories and propagate, they bubble them up to the surface to, all hail like a certain either zodiac sign or...
Okay, I get what you're saying. Let's look at New Year's. I talk about New Year's all the time.
Yeah.
Where it just happens to be that New Year's, Sirius reaches its highest point at midnight, and then it falls the rest of the year. And so you can look at it as on New Year's, the world, Times Square, New Year begins, and we're all looking at the ball dropping. And I'm like, this is what it's about. And then you can find other New Year's based on Sirius. The New Year is based on Sirius rising, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Good. I'm glad. So that's what I'm saying in the dichotomy. Like, yes, sure, some of the big events may be related to presidential stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to say anything. But some of the bigger stuff, sure, it has to be some larger story that's interwoven through time. It's a thread, right, that's interwoven through all the zodiac, or it's the pattern that we're able to see easily. But maybe some of the local events are something a little bit less severe or less important, but still play a part in the convincing and propaganda role that if we don't believe this now, then, we may never believe it. I mean, it's tied to climate change. It's tied to a lot. Politics, I could go into local politics, and how that is flipped around. It's really fun, Tim. But anyways, I don't know. Have I digressed enough tonight or what?
No, this is great.
I feel like this is too much.
No,
too much.
We're reverse engineering not just the theater of Psywar, but the strange supernatural or occult underpinnings of it all. And what does it mean about us? What is our role in it? And it brings up the question of what is termed magic, and if real, what are they doing with it? And it raises all these questions. And I'm not really a new ager or whatever, but I'm just trying to study the meaning of all this stuff. And you can't separate the politics from the sorceress anymore, like what James Down said.
True. We have to nail this down. You're doing a great. I'll say, in general, like I think the group. Well, I'll put it that way. Like the Gilded and the Discord, we are like, there's some good conversations, and better than other rooms, I'll say, better than other chat rooms, where we understand that we can be played in any level of this Grand Theft Auto game this sandbox that we're trapped in. So I think, when it comes to reverse engineering, like the news and all that stuff, I think that's like super, super important. I don't know if we're there yet, and I know I have a feeling you might feel the same, think the same way, but we need to nail some things down because I want to be at a point where we can predict stuff better, right? Does that make? Do you feel that way too, Tim? Do you think? I should say not feel, but do you think that we should be predicting stuff a little bit better too? Because Netflix is great, seeing movies in the theaters is great. Yeah, it's predictive capabilities, but I think there's more to this stuff. What do you think?
I think that you are probably onto something here. Like, for example, when Gabby Petito was kidnapped, it pretty much correlated with the story of the Spring Maiden being kidnapped by Hades and taken into the underworld for the fall, and her remains are found as we enter the fall on the 22nd of September. So I'm like, okay, there seems to be a structure here where it's based on this ritual calendar, this pagan calendar, and you can look at witchcraft or druid rites, and so you might get an idea of what to expect on the smaller scales. But now we're living through this great reset. So I had been looking, when they said great reset, I had been looking at this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction 21 rather, of 2020 as comporting with the new age, because they're saying that we're moving into the age of Horus or Mars, whatever you want to call it, but that this new age represents this total transformation, and they've called it the Great Work. And they've called it this since 1906. So I'm like, okay, or 1904 when Crowley put out this book. And the Freemasons, like, I guess, Manly P. Hall and others, use the same phraseology, the Great Work of Ages. So here we have the Great Reset and the Great Awakening. So clearly, this setting of a pattern according to some astrological template is how they operate, both on a macro and on micro scales. And when it comes to ages, epochs, or even just the year.
Just to continue the propaganda, right? Is that kind of... Do they have to? Or else, if everyone figures it out...
They are the scribes of the God, the media. They're the intermediaries between creation and our perception of it. And so you said predicting the future. Well, after COVID came in, it's like, okay, they phased out Islamic terrorism, but they established a template for a domestic violent extremist, I guess you'd call it a domestic equivalent, and that would be the QAnon radicals. So one prediction I made was, from here on forward, expect 19 years of domestic terrorism as the main threat. We're no longer afraid of Muslims. So I think we can make predictions, like general predictions and trends, when it comes to the Psy-War in that sense. We can predict that lockdowns for the climate are probably going to follow now that we've been trained on the virus lockdowns. And then I've also recently come to believe, I think this is the case, that much of the moral panic that we see on the right is actually the psyop equivalent of the intimidation of the left by the anti-vaxxers and the virus. So in other words, I'm saying that there's the pandemic model to scare people and the moral panic-demic model. One is traditional fear, traditional sin. One is the new age sin, the trend. So yeah, we are doing this reverse engineering, and we need to get better at predicting and at spotting these trends. Absolutely.
I could go off on more on the politics of it, but it's not for this conversation. It's so surface level at this point. We're just so far past that. It's like, it's crazy. The politics aspect of it, just to me, can be summarized in propaganda. It's just what can they do to convince us, one way or the other, that they're either on our side or they're not on our side. You know what I mean? It's just to keep us. It's like a carrot, So.
Well, one more thing, because you had mentioned that you're kind of tired of the Matrix thing, and I understand that, and I want to bring this up because it's pretty clear to me that the red pill versus blue pill is a false dichotomy, that they're both in the world stage media ecosystem. And so in other words, the red
100%.
The red pill has always been a false awakening. Always. And that's why they packaged it so slickly. So just bringing that up, that I think you're right to say, that's why I put out an article last week, Beyond the Red Pill.
Yes. Yeah. I saw that. Yeah, it's easy to fall into the two categories and to not really realize that there could be multiple categories. I don't know how to word it, but hey, Tim, this has been great. I really do appreciate you, and thank you very much.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for calling. And thanks for
Yeah.
commenting. And I think for Infinite Plane Saturday, I will take a walk through the last week in the Gilded, and I'll introduce some people to it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Thanks.
All right. Good talking to you. Have a great night.
All right, thanks, Tim. Take care. Bye.
All right. So does life imitate psyops, or do psyops imitate life? How would you rate the quality of this call? 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4, or 5? We'll give it a 5 star. Elephant Tusk says the entire material world is created to imprison and capture energy. Yeah, okay, on that, like the idea of the realm, the material realm, transcending it, the number 33, all the coding they put into it, the number black, or the color black, like magnetic. And it makes me think of the supposed magnetic rock at the center of the North Pole, according to Mercator and John Dee. This 33-mile circumference black magnetic rock at the center of it all. And, it's all just really intriguing to me because I think it's all likely like some kind of explanation for incarnated beings. That's the best way I can explain it. And before we got into the call, I brought up the Elvis, Bowie, and all these Rocket Man connections. How Starman went through a rocket to space, and Starman is Bowie, the man who fell to Earth. And Mr. Satan is an anagram for Starman. And Satan, we're talking about falling to Earth, so a falling star. Star is light. You see it fall, but it hits the ground, and it's rock. So the rock star and the embodiment of Lucifer, the devil, or Satan, that these rock stars like Bowie, and they associate themselves with their iconography. And I'm saying that they could represent the descent of light, the falling into material existence. So the rock star, or the meteor, which is the center of worship at the Kaaba with the cube, or the movie we recently watched, Asteroid City. I've been talking about how it's all about the asteroid, and the alien comes back down to get this meteor, Asteroid City. Well, the light from the sky that they're looking at, it comes down and it's an alien. I think it's all somehow allegory for incarnation and transcendence, and it's encoded into the numbers 42 and 33, and it's all just intriguing to me. I mean, why are these things relevant? Well, you tell me. They put it in all the movies. I was in film studies. I was like, let me go watch The Truman Show, and I'm just blown away by the obvious symbolic meaning to the dog star falling and precipitating an awakening from this false man into becoming a true man, and the layers of meaning encoded into movies. It was kind of eye-opening. So whatever this place is, there are roadmaps that show the way out, if that's what it's pointing to. Or it's pointing to some kind of esoteric system for understanding this realm. But whatever it is, it's truth in plain sight that they hoard. And so we talk about the monopoly, the monocult, the cult of the monolith, and the monopoly on media, the monopoly on world view formation, and possibly a monopoly on reality influence. Or I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not engaging in magical thinking as a thing I'm advocating, but they seem to operate on that premise. Why else would they be super obsessed with having everybody's gaze focused on the black cube, your iPhone? Okay, let's see here. Going through your comments. Lots of popcorn. Okay, let's go ahead and get back on some of these notes that we were on. Skill says, are you chasing rainbows or are they chasing you? Now, I'm glad you brought up rainbows because we're talking about the numbers and everything. And the rainbow, isn't that, it's something at 42 degrees with rainbows. The angle of deviation between the incoming light rays from the sun and the refracted rays directed to the observer eye is 42 degrees for the red light. I've seen that number associated with 42. How rainbows form, the rainbow angle, 42 degrees. And I'm just bringing this up because in the I've read some mythology in some certain African traditions. I don't know if Voodoo Pantheon is a book I read, Serpent and the Rainbow. But anyway, it described how the gods descend to earth on the rainbow. And so the gods in this context, like the seven African powers or seven principal deities, and then you have the rainbow, and of course the colors of the rainbow and light. So all the elements here of light descending to earth and 42 still kind of line up with the meaning of that number. And I really feel like we've been vindicated with this recent bit of info about the Mach 33 as the escape velocity. Infinite Plane Trotter says rainbow is symbolic for Lucifer. Well, that would make sense. You're talking about light ultimately, and he's their god of light. And Kenneth Anger, the filmmaker who was a huge part of the Satanic Church and had some fascinating connections, disturbing connections with Alfred Kinsey, he often spoke about how in this new age our religion is being. He wrote Hollywood Babylon and knew what Hollywood meant and movie magic. And he said that the god of movie magic, if there is a saint of cinema, he said it'd be Lucifer in light. Okay, let's see here. Elephant Tusk says somewhere over the rainbow, lots of programming in the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, the Wizard of Oz. There's so many layers to that one. It could be the Wizard of Oz, like an ounce of gold, follow the yellow brick road. There's the monetary version. I tend to think it's also the Wizards of Oz that run this place, possibly even Wizards of Osiris. And the Wizard of Oz has his full name is something like Oz Pinhead. It's actually his full name. There's a whole list. It's like an acronym. But there are some fascinating layers we can go into with this. But the main thing is this. The Wizard of Oz is a hologram, and it's rumor, and it's a psyop that he is a wizard at all. And it's very disappointing to find out that he's just some old dude behind a curtain. And I think that explains more about this world. Like a lot of people want to say predictive programming is the wizards telling us what they're going to do before they do it so they can be absolved from karma. I hear this and I really try to I veer away from any attempt to mystify predictive programming, to treat the Wizard of Oz like the real thing, like he's a wizard. Cope says there's a new Wizard of Oz coming out in 2024 called Wicked. Well, okay, another thing that's significant here, I think, is the Seattle is the Emerald City, and Seattle figures prominently in a lot of predictive programming. In fact, the band World Order, I think it's a Japanese boy band, they put out a song called "Let's Start World War III," released on 3/11, 2018, and it takes place in Seattle, and they actually pantomime an assassination of Trump. So it's another one of these videos that suggests that World War III is going to start in Seattle, which was why on the eve of 3/11/2020 I said, hey, World War III is going to start tomorrow in Seattle, which it did. Ground Zero was in Seattle. Copaesthetic says the new version will have the Wicked Witch as the good guy. Okay, I think that story Wicked used to be a play, and they put her, is it Elphaba, in a more sympathetic light. Makes perfect sense. Now, there's something about Dorothy worth mentioning. Dorothy and Dolores Hayes from Lolita, and this archetype of the sort of like an initiate in a way, like the fool on the fool's journey with the dog. But the character Dorothy is reflected in a few other movies. Like I even think Westworld, the main character in Westworld, who is like Persephone, who gets taken into the underworld, is another version of Dorothy. Dorothy's kind of a Persephone, where Oz is like the underworld, and the Wizard of Oz would be Hades, and he's kidnapped her for a time. Like I think there's a layer to that character. And again, Lolita, Dolores Hayes. We're talking about Also, interestingly, the character from Westworld, who I think represents Dorothy, she played Lolita in a music video called Heart Shaped Glasses, a Marilyn Manson video. Anyway, these are just other archetypes to look at, and this is a reoccurring theme. I'm not surprised they're bringing it back out. Intergenerational mind control. They got to bring out the same characters. Elephant Tusk said, I'd like to do a deep dive on the dark side of the moon as well. Yeah, we'll have to go through a lot of the music. We always talk about the movies, and the music is a huge part of it. Like, for example, David Bowie and his musical catalog corresponded to our progress into the space age. He played Space Oddity, corresponded to Space Odyssey. The name David Bowie corresponds to David Bowman in Space Odyssey, the guy who merges with the monolith. And we've already done that. But the idea here in that one is Hell 9000, and it's the all-seeing lens of the AI that basically Skynet or Otto in Wall-E. But a lot of ideas were introduced in that. But David Bowie's music has corresponded with moving into the space age. And specifically, I think Starman, which is a song that prophesizes this savior from space who would obviously save us from climate change. It's always to save man from man. But we'll do a lot of music decodes because some of these actors, or sorry, these musicians are carriers of propaganda just as much as these actors are. And album covers are pretty fairly well represented in a lot of the predictive programming, obviously. All right, let me go ahead and continue through my notes. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. We were talking about the Rocket Man and all these January 8th birthdays and the connection between Bowie and Elvis by the birthday and the Black Star. Bowie dying just after he releases this album on Elvis and his birthdays as well. And strangely, Elton John, another Rocket Man character. Don't want to get too far down into this, but maybe I'll do a follow-up tomorrow because I think what the main point is I want to bring is this, is that these rock stars seem to be icons, just as like we brought up the Barbie character or the Red Witch, their Babylon goddess. Well, the rock star, I think, is another object of worship, and it represents this savior or conditioning us for a savior. I think that's what a lot of it is. Strange as it may sound, I think we're being conditioned to accept a new type of savior from above, which is probably programmed into us. Like I think they tap into primal fears, and prime like basically, for example, there seems to be an obsession with making us agoraphobic, and it seems to be we're hardwired to fear retribution from above, from the storm god. It just seems like there are certain things that we're just predisposed to fall for, and I think that idol worship is one of those things. Okay, I'm going through some comments here. Elephant Tusk says Judy Garland was a major victim of monarch programming. Yeah, if you read that book by Fritz Brickmeyer about the formula to create a totally undetectable Illuminati mind-controlled slave, great reading. But he has all these codes, and like these are the codes they use to activate the mind-controlled victims. But he suggested that Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz are hugely represented in mind control. And I have a few thoughts on MK Ultra, and I'm glad you brought that up. Because if you think about it, the idea of Mind Control Ultra or MK Ultra is that you have a mind control victim, like a celebrity, who's got multiple personalities, and they have a handler or a programmer. So the programmer programs these mind controlled slaves to do all kinds of things. And these mind controlled victims are very capable of representing different personalities and they're compartmentalized, we're told. But I think that might be misinformation. I think that the MK Ultra story might be there to cover up something else, like crisis actors and handlers or the shadowy people. Like I think there might be instead of mind control handlers, maybe these are the people with the scripts. Maybe we're looking at MK Ultra as misdirection from crisis actors and manufactured fake news. I don't know, but I tend to think that MK Ultra is kind of like a misdirection, sort of like cloning. Cloning, the idea of a clone is kind of science fiction, but behind it, there's the reality of hyper realistic synthetic masks that they've been using for 40 years. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm just bringing it up that the book on it has a lot of significance placed on Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz, which makes a lot of sense weirdly. Like, for example, Alice in Wonderland is also a similar story of somebody going into an underworld. And in that case, it's the Mad Hatter who would represent Hades. And she, Persephone in the underworld for a time. Alice in Wonderland, weirdly enough, is also used in Scientology training. I know it doesn't make any sense, but they have these training drills they do when you first get in, where you read random passages from Alice in Wonderland again and again and again in different tones of voice. You can read about these training rituals they do. Kind of peculiar. When I was investigating it, I thought that is kind of strange. I had read about Alice in Wonderland and mind control. Then you have Alice in Wonderland in every Scientology training room. Then you have Alice as the name of Tom Cruise's wife in Eyes Wide Shut, who seems to be mind controlled. But anyway, there's probably more to that we should get into later. Skill says trauma-based mind control is not new. Shattering the mind into alters has been going on for as far back as known. See, this is the thing I'm wondering though, is are we looking at mind-controlled victims or actors, people playing roles? Like for example, let's just take for example David Hogg. He's playing a role. He's an actor, and this act is something that is taken to be reality by all the people who don't know how crisis actors can be infiltrated into our reality. But I wouldn't say that he's been shattered mentally and that he's been given a programmed personality. No, I think that he's just an actor, and that his handler isn't a mind controller, but the guy that, is essentially a director. Like the relationship between a director and an actor might be the real relationship we're seeing between handlers and programmed MK Ultra multiples. Dinah South says the area of CERN is called Alice. Oh yeah, and the drill that they use to do the tunnels underground is also called the Alice drills, like the bore the boring drill that Musk uses, for example. Alice, which is fascinating for a few reasons, because you've got the Alice in Wonderland and the tunnel connection. So the Alice tunnel boring machine. And they say it's not because of Alice in Wonderland, it's because of somebody named Alice, so they say. The Alice tunnel boring machine to dig underground sections of the now this is fascinating. Now something else about this too. The mind control program they use in the hyper-realistic school shooting drills is called Alice. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. It's called the Alice drill, which, yeah, I mean, this to me is mind control, MK Ultra, trauma-induced mind control, where they use these lockdown drills to create a Stockholm Syndrome relationship between the students and the state. And they also convince them of these bowl cut shooters running amok, and it terrorizes them. So I think that's the definition of mind control as well. Something else too. The Alice in Wonderland syndrome. The Alice in Wonderland syndrome is a set of symptoms that have to do with an altering of body image size. You know how Alice shrinks and grows? An alteration of visual perception. So spatial distortions. Now, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome is a symptom of something called the Epstein-Barr virus. And this is a strange one. So, the Epstein-Barr virus is some kind of STD that causes you to have the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where you have these weird spatial distortions and your relative size of things. Now, here's where it gets really weird. Jeffrey Epstein worked for a guy named Donald Barr, the father of A.G. Barr, and this is the former AG. Now, fascinatingly, Epstein worked for this guy, Barr, who wrote a book called Space Relations. Now, I was just talking about distorted spatial relations. Well, he wrote a book called Space Relations, and what is this about? It's about basically mind controlled. It's a science fiction book about teenagers transported to islands in space, little island planets, where they are enslaved by a bunch of perverts. So you have Epstein and Barr, and then you have the Epstein-Barr virus and the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and this whole thing called space relations, which is they call it a gothic, what is it called? A gothic interplanetary tale. Anyway, it says here space relations saw increased public attention after Barr's former employee Jeffrey Epstein died in a cell. The conspiracy theorists have seen similarities between the violent sexual depictions in space relations and Epstein's trafficking activities. Again, these are connections. The same story, trafficking to islands. I mean, this is just unbelievable. It's pretty unsettling. Depictions of enslaved people, teenage girls, trafficked, coercive acts for the purposes of entertainment and controlled procreation. Now, what was Epstein about? Having like 50 babies. He brought people over for some kind of idea of like eugenics. Says these novels have a fixation on the sexualization of adolescents. Anyway, you get the point. Space relations, Epstein-Barr violence. Epstein-Barr virus, and then the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. All of it very weirdly connected. Okay, let's see. Diana South says Alice, a large ion Collier experiment. I noticed that the CERN has a bunch of weird Alice in Wonderland references, which really triggers the Mandela effect. And I think CERN is ultimately, when I saw their ceremonies in Switzerland with the horned god, it looks like the QAnon shaman kind of, but this like hairy guy with goat horns comes out. And I'm like, that's got to be Cernunnos, or Cernunnos, the witchcraft god. CERN, and then Cernunnos. The horned one. Archaic, powerful deity worshipped as the Lord of Wild Things. And this is sort of a sort of a Baphomet. I think it might be the same thing, but he's a god corresponding, I think, to the same thing, god of nature. But Cernunnos and CERN are probably the same thing. Like, they use science as a cover for basically Satan worship. Just to be, I'm not being specific in my terminology, but yeah, they're using the cover of experimenting with light as a cover for worshiping what is really they worship the god of light. I think that's all just a cover, like we've been talking about. Rockets are obelisks. That kind of sums it up. Let me play this clip here. Pretty entertaining. Lauren Witzke, Delaware GOP candidate in 2020. Fascinating Twitter account. Major league troll. She used to say she was a flat earther.
And if you truly believe that Joe Biden, the president of the United States, took a real vaccine on live television after what happened to Tiffany.
Well, anyway, I don't want to get suspended here, but basically she says it's the mark of the beast. This is another one. Unboxing Truth or Chicken Feed. Apparently, Hunter's laptop is a bestseller. You can buy it. It's 4,000 nude pictures of Hunter Biden. And here's an unboxing of Hunter Biden's laptop in print.
I've got something awesome. Let's see what's in it.
She's going to have a very, very
Da-da-da.
busy weekend.
New giant stickers. Ooh.
4,000 nude pictures of Hunter Biden. And they feel like they're fighting the deep state. They feel like something. And this is a fascinating one, just bringing up AI one more time. Michael Flynn says that dark forces are using AI to rewrite the Bible. And this kind of ties into CERN and Mandela effect.
And right now there is an effort by these dark forces that are in this valley, that we're in this valley with these dark forces, okay? And there's an effort to rewrite the Bible. Did you know that? Yep. Yeah, there is. And you know how they're going to do it? They're going to do it. They already started talking about this a couple weeks ago. They're going to do it using AI. Okay? And
they're going to rewrite the Bible using AI. I mean, I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know. I mean, you have people who've made alterations, like the Jeffersonian Bible. I don't know what he's exactly talking about, unless somehow it's going to change in a way that I don't know what he means, to be quite honest. I really don't know what he means by that. Like, is the Mandela effect says the Bible's been changing already, which is a very controversial thing. All right, this has been great. I'm going to go back to the 24/7. We're going to go ahead and turn that on and subscribe to get the archives sent to your inbox. Thanks to all the chatters. Appreciate it. Thank you to all the callers as well. And tomorrow for Infinite Plane Saturday, I plan to do a walkthrough of the last week in the IPS Gilded Think Tank. All right, this is Chief Crow, Mask of the Beast. And then I'm going to turn this over momentarily.
Faceless cock, another NPC. Uh-oh, I think they made a typo. Just like Tuttle Bottle, but the R is the S. Everyone's gone totally retarded. Auto believers of the television programming. A 33 with a double E, yeah. WWF. Now you're out of breath. me.